Time is passing, yet for the United States of America, there will be no forgetting September the 11th. We will remember every rescuer who died in honor. We will remember every family that lives in grief. We will remember the fire and ash, the last phone calls, the funerals of the children. President George W. Bush.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
Hello, MacPack. It's great to be back with you for another episode of our program. This is On the Move. This is the show that attempts to inspire you to stand up for your rights. Today's show is titled, Where Were You on 9/11? This is episode 133 of On the Move with Mac Worley. I, of course, am your host, Mac Worley III, and I really want to hear from you guys today. The number to the show, the MacPack phone lines are open right now, by the way, for you guys. The number to the show is 360-450-5625. Again, that's 360-450-5625. You can get us on Facebook, facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow. You can also get us on Twitter @OnTheMoveShow. I want to hear your stories today. I want to hear what was going on in your head during 9/11. Where were you? I want to hear your memories, your stories. I think it's important that we take this moment to reflect. You know, we hear all the time, never forget. Never forget. We're never going to forget. And how we can continue to remember is, you know, every time this day happens, this is a 15-year anniversary of this horrible national event where almost 3,000 Americans died. 3,000. I mean, I always look back on this day and I think about where I was. And I'm sure many of you are doing the same thing today. This is the 15-year anniversary. Can you believe that it's been 15 years? I don't know if any of you are feeling like I feel on this day, but the images, the event, it's so seared into my memory that it's something I'm never going to forget. You know, I can remember hearing people talk about where they were during the JFK assassination, and this has to be a very similar experience, I think. You know, people would tell me, I remember my family telling me where they were when JFK died and how they felt when that happened. And, you know, I couldn't relate until 9/11, and now I understand. I can tell you the exact moment I found out, and I'm sure many of you can do the same. I know where I was. I know what happened the rest of that day. In fact, I'll go ahead and share my story just to get the ball rolling here. I really hope you guys do call in, by the way. The number to the show is 360-450-5625. 360-450-5625. So, my story. I was a 10th grader in high school. 10th grade. It was 2001. And I was sitting in my 10th grade English class, and my teacher was going on about something that I don't remember. But somebody came in the room and just said, "We've got to turn on the TV. Turn on the TV." And this is back, I don't know what classrooms are like now. I'm sure there's like a TV in every single classroom all the time. But we had this big, huge tube TV, you know, the kind, and it wasn't a flat screen or anything, kind that they would have actually on a cart. It's a big cart, and they would wheel it around from classroom to classroom. And they wheeled this TV into our room. And, you know, we're hearing stories about it, or we're hearing them talk about how a plane had hit the World Trade Center. And, you know, everybody's freaking out. Everybody's like, "Oh, wow, this is a horrible tragedy. You know, it's so sad." People thought it maybe was an accident. Maybe somebody accidentally flew into the first World Trade Center building. Nobody really knew what was going on. And again, myself included, everyone in the classroom didn't really understand the gravity of the situation. And, we're kind of just trying to figure out what happened. And as we're sitting in the classroom, the second plane hits the World Trade Center. And at this point, everybody knows this isn't an accident. There's no chance whatsoever that this was just some fluke event where two different planes hit the World Trade Center building at the same time within a couple of minutes of each other. There's no way. Now things start to get serious. Now people are really starting to panic. And you can see the looks on my teachers' faces. I'm looking at the figures of authority I have in the room, and I'm looking at them now, and I can see this is not just an isolated event anymore. This is something real, something terrifying. I can see the looks on their faces. A lot of the students in my classroom were feeling the same way. There's a lot of panic. They ended up canceling school. They called us all into the auditorium, into this big... It was basically where we held study hall, and they called us all into this big cafeteria of sorts. It wasn't really the cafeteria. We didn't use it for the cafeteria anymore, but it was this big room with a bunch of tables and chairs. We were all filed into that room, everybody in the school. And this is early. This is early into the day. This is like halfway through our school day, a little less than halfway through our school day. And they bring us all in there, and they're trying to coordinate the buses to come take us home because they're canceling school. So everybody's in the room. It's loud, a lot of people talking, some people crying because they have family members that could be around the Twin Towers. It was a lot of nerves in that room. It was supercharged with emotion. And then the bus comes, and it takes us home. And I remember sitting on that bus, and that was probably the quietest bus ride I've ever been on. I don't remember anyone making a peep. Now, I don't know if that was like that for everybody who rode the bus home, but I remember my bus was extremely quiet. And I got home, and I turn on the news that day, and I'm watching more about what happened. I have to understand what happened, and I can't understand because it's beyond comprehension that somebody would hijack a plane and use it, because planes had been getting hijacked for a long time before this event. We'd already seen events where Islamic terrorists were hijacking planes and demanding ransom money and things like that. But this was the first time that somebody actually turned it into a missile. Somebody turned this jet engine into a missile. And it wasn't just the World Trade Center. We start hearing reports now that it's happening in Pennsylvania, where a plane crashed in the middle of nowhere. And later we find out that these passengers started to realize what was happening, that their plane was going to be used as a missile as well. And they figured they might as well go for it. They might as well at least try to take back their plane rather than just let themselves be killed. So they try to take over the plane, and they end up causing the plane to crash, and at least they stop further loss of life. And then we find out about the plane that hit the Pentagon. This whole day, in my memory, is going to stand out as one of the most surreal days, where I was glued to my TV. And this was before I was even really into news and politics. I was a news junkie that day. That day and the following days. This is one of those stories where I think every single American was trying to understand. And I think on the following days we did come together, but I don't necessarily think that we always came together on the right things, like the Patriot Act, like the National Defense Authorization Act, things where we sacrifice our liberty in order to gain security. Again, we did feel unified in a lot of ways. You know, people realized this was an attack on America. And it wasn't just, Republicans versus Democrats. Everybody was willing to give the government the authority to do what was needed to keep us safe. And this is one of the things that I always talk about here on the program is how dangerous it is to try to keep the government in that position to be the one to keep you safe. I think they have a role in that, obviously, but to make them the sole ones responsible for your safety is unwise. It's unwise for us to be vulnerable here for attack, obviously, which is, again, why I believe that there is some role for government in this process, like having a strong military and vetting immigrants who are coming into our country, especially from areas that, I don't know, are known for jihadi terrorism. But as far as making them the sole ones responsible, we can see event after event after event where it's evident that the government cannot keep you safe. From the San Bernardino attack, to 9/11, to the Boston bombing, to the Pulse nightclub shooting, to Chattanooga shooting on a recruiting station. Again, the government cannot keep you safe from every single event, from every single threat. That's why it's incredibly important that we take up the initiative to defend ourselves and defend other people around us. It's not enough just to be united. We have to be united on the right things. We have to be united on what is, as we've talked about on this show in the past, American exceptionalism. And it's not the fact that we're better than anyone else. It's not the fact that, we're smarter than you or we're American supremacists or something like that. We don't think that we're genetically superior or something along those lines. American exceptionalism is the idea that America is exceptional because America is free. And free people will always be able to beat slaves. And what makes you free? The lack of government stopping you from doing what is in your own self-interest. So I want to take your calls. We're going to cut to a commercial break. When we come back, I want to take your calls. I want to hear your stories. Give us a call. The number to the show is 360-450-5625. 360-450-5625. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you guys, hearing what your memories are of that day, where you were, what you were thinking. Give us a call. We'll be right back.
Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current active duty military, reserve, guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore, with the support of like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand with us, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help us God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/OnTheMoveShow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
And we're back. I appreciate you all sticking with us through the break. If you would like to join today's conversation, the number of the show is 360-450-5625. Again, that's 360-450-5625. By the way, don't forget to check us out at our website, OnTheMoveShow.com. Follow us on Spreaker.com/OnTheMoveShow. That's SPREAKER.com/OnTheMoveShow. And like us on Facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow. Follow us on Twitter @OnTheMoveShow. Subscribe to us on YouTube.com/OnTheMoveShow. So we have a caller on the line. I think this is Dan Sandini. Hey, Dan, are you there?
I'm here, Mac. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. I appreciate you calling in, by the way. I wanted to hear your story from 9/11. If you don't mind sharing it with us, I'd love to hear what happened and what you were thinking and everything on that day.
Sure. Well, before I was a citizen journalist, and a lot of your listeners know me from my website, daylightdisinfectant.com, and before I did that, I used to be an engineer at a couple of different places, and in 2000, the year before 9/11, 2001, I was working in New York City for Arthur Andersen Consulting, and my client was Goldman Sachs in downtown Manhattan. And I used to stay frequently. I would fly down on Monday and come back on Friday from New York City. I was living in Boston, working in New York, and living at that. You'll see, quite often you'll see the Marriott that is across the street from where the Twin Towers were, where the World Trade Center was. And that building remains standing after the towers dropped. So, in any case, just getting back to, so the year before, I was living in New York City, basically, living across the street from the Twin Towers, getting my coffee in the basement of the World Trade Center, and then going down to Goldman, which was down near Battery Park in downtown New York City. And so I saw the Twin Towers on a daily basis. They're across the street from me. That was right up until April of 2000. And I finished my MBA program and left Anderson and Goldman and took a job in Germany, of all places. Mm-hmm. And on 9/11, I was actually working at the headquarters of the United States Army in Europe. And I know you're a military person, so you kind of know. And that is in Heidelberg, Germany. Mm-hmm. And I was on the Campbell Barracks, and I was walking between buildings. So now I have this experience of flying down to New York every week, and I know how crowded the skies are when you come into LaGuardia. I mean, you can just see on a busy Monday morning, there's just tons of planes in the sky, you know. And someone said to me, "Hey, plane crashed into the World Trade Center," and all I could think of was, you know, some air traffic controller took a little snooze and a small plane crashed into the building. I didn't know it would take it down. You know, I just thought that it was probably a small private plane that crashed into the building, and I was feeling sorry for the pilot, you know, because you know, a small plane like that and a big building like that, you know, I think fire codes and whatever, the building's not going to come down. And you know, slowly over the course of the day, that evolved into obviously something that was much, much larger and much more sinister, which affected all of our lives in so many different ways. And just to hear that there were, you know, 3,000 people, and to my knowledge, I did not know a single person inside the building. Of course, you know, hundreds of thousands of people breathe in and out of Manhattan every day. So I did not know any of them. I quickly got in touch with folks that I knew who still worked in the financial district, and even some of my closest colleagues who still worked in New York, didn't know anybody that got killed in the crash. So, but many of them watched the towers come down from their windows, and that's just a horrific thing to think of and be seen. My going away party from Arthur Andersen was at Windows in the World, which is, I believe, South Tower, almost all the way up, and one of the planes crashed either just below or right into that floor. And a little detail that maybe your listeners don't know is that, the reason why they couldn't come up with an accurate body count, and they still do not have an accurate body count, as you were saying earlier in the program, it's about 3,000 people. But at a place like Windows on the World, which is a restaurant, like any restaurant, they have a lot of people in the kitchen who maybe, let's just say it like it is, they're illegal aliens, okay, that are working in the kitchen. So they didn't have proper documentation when they started working there. They still go to work there every day. And that took out, and it's hot. That everybody in that restaurant was instantly incinerated. So, and that's where my going-away party was. It was the most beautiful restaurant you'd ever want to see, restaurant and bar, just absolutely beautiful, and just a very touching, sentimental going-away party, which occurred in April of 2000. And so, just thinking back on that, to know that was gone, that's gone. It was just utterly incredible. And, over the course of the following weeks unfolded, the security at the barracks, and I know, you being part of the military and stuff like that, you went through the military when 9/11 had already happened, but before that, it was a different world in the military. I used to go in the back gate and just get the nod from the dude at the gate, because every day I gave that guy my ID. Every day going in there. So after a few months of that, the guys wave you in. That never happened again after that. And the lines for cars going into the barracks over in Heidelberg were just immense. They just went way down the street, so I started biking in in all kinds of bad German weather. I didn't live that far, but I used to bike in instead just to keep my car, just to skip the line in the morning, which was just horrendous. And German people, I guess I'll end on the note, unless you ask me any questions that you have, but German people all came to the front gate of the barracks. It was very touching, and left roses, and there's still a lot of affinity, or at that time there was still a lot of goodwill between German people and Americans for basically kicking the Nazis' ass. I mean, there were plenty of Germans who didn't like the Nazis and appreciate the Americans being there, and they have connections, family connections to the Americans living in the community. Just so your listeners get an idea, just north of there is a Kaiserslautern area. There are 70,000 at the time, and I believe it's even gotten bigger now because of Ramstein. But it was the largest settling of Americans outside the United States of America. There were 70,000 Americans living in the Kaiserslautern area. So there's this little piece of America over there, if your listeners can imagine. That's touched by this, just like any other American. So it just went through the American community, and there was an outreach from the German people, just coming. I remember one day waiting to come in, and a girl stopped on her moped, and I think her boyfriend, it was like a Vespa, and the boyfriend was driving, and she was on the back, and she got off and put some flowers into the pile. So there were flowers and candles and little signs and little teddy bears and all kinds of things just accumulating at the gate of the barracks. And it stayed for quite a while, and I remember sometime after that them taking it down. And it just remember the horror of it as it unfolded before me. One other story that I'll share very quickly with you, Mac, is that so I used to stay at that Marriott that was right across the street, which was, all the windows were blown out in the front of it in the explosion, but it stayed up. And it was, I believe it was fully taken down. I have been back. I have been up in the Freedom Tower. I can't remember going back to see the Marriott, but I think it was completely demolished and put back up again. But there is still a Marriott down there. And but in any case, I was watching television. I did not have cable in Germany and didn't watch every night on TV, but I slowly watched on the internet videos and things like that. And I remember seeing, as I used to walk home, there was a Brooks Brothers suit, we call it clothing, men's clothing vendor, or high-end sales on the walking towards my hotel. And I remember seeing that Brooks Brothers, and it was almost completely destroyed, and they had spray painted on the front of it morgue, and they were using that Brooks Brothers as a makeshift morgue for the people that they're pulling out of there. So those are some of my strongest memories of working in New York the year previously, and then working at the headquarters for the Army. So
during your time overseas, you didn't see anybody celebrating the United States getting attacked, or hear any conversations from somebody saying, that the Americans deserved it from all their overseas interventionism or anything like that?
No, I mean, that has all evolved since then. They had more local problems with radical Islam communities inside of Germany, those sort of no-go zones were beginning to develop, because I remember talking to my girlfriend and other friends in the German community before 9/11 happened, and people worried about the fact that people living in Germany, because of the loose immigration policies with Turkey, were being more Muslims and more Islamists than they were Germans. And so that was a worry even back in those communities, even back before 2000. And of course, we were given security briefings and told to really keep an eye out for. There are periodic attacks on military facilities in Germany by other people, I would suppose Muslims included, but we were, told what to watch for and to be alert and on, high security alert. And a lot of our mission changed to support more the war on terror, because we began the war on terror at that point. And none of our lives were ever the same. I mean, think about how much of your life has been consumed in security lines since then, and how many of your freedoms have been taken away, right? Many of your freedoms taken away just because of that. So.
Absolutely, yeah. So you being a little older than myself, not too much older, obviously, but you've experienced how life was different before 9/11. And I'm just curious, what do you think are the biggest things, other than obviously like airport security and things like that?
Yep, security at military facilities never be the same since before after that. It was perfunctory before then, and now it's mandatory and very strict, particularly overseas. And, there were open bases in the United States at that point. I've got to believe that that's been reduced significantly, if not eliminated entirely, in the United States. I used to work on an open military post that they would watch us as we came in. We could wave our badge from our particular contractor as we came on the post. But I got to believe that's not the case at Hanscom Air Force Base, where I worked for many years, and all across the country. So I would say post security, and then the mission that the military was fighting just radically changed. Mm-hmm. I mean, all the things that we wanted to support. War became a real thing, right, Mac? At that point, right shortly after that, we invaded Afghanistan, and it spiraled from there into Iraq, going after Saddam Hussein, who was supposedly harboring Al Qaeda, and also had chemical weapons, the weapons of mass destruction. And people started really gearing up for, we're at the 5th Corps, which is also housed on those same barracks, or was at the time, began gearing up fairly rapidly to deploy to support operations in Iraq. And so I was very much involved with those kinds of things. But it was my experience with having a country mobilized to war. My whole career had been with the military, almost, except for the experience that I just shared with you, working for Goldman. But before that, my whole career had been working in systems engineering and radar and wargaming and simulations. Well, it wasn't wargaming anymore, Mac. It was more real life, and putting those examples to work and building information systems that supported real life military actions.
So
go ahead.
Well, being that you had so much contact with the military at the time, the way I look at 9/11, there was approximately, I think it was 2,977 that they know of confirmed deaths during the 9/11 attack. But in addition to that, there were subsequent deaths. There was over 6,000 U.S. troops that have died from the involvement in the Middle East, from Iraq and Afghanistan combined. So I'm just curious, do you have anyone that you know personally that lost their life in these conflicts? And again, that is a result of 9/11. So how did that affect you?
Well, I retired in 2005 and 2006, and to be honest with you, no. The people rotated out of there, and my contact with soldiers in terms of like having them as good friends, there aren't that many, to be honest with you. So not people that I stayed in touch with. So I can't think of, to be honest with you, I can't think of a single person. I know Ty Razoo, who is in the Portland area. His son did 2 tours in Afghanistan, and so I've met with him and know him. And so he's a fairly serious guy. But I don't know anybody that passed away and was killed in action since then. But
you're lucky. Very lucky. I know far too many people that have been touched by the aftermath of 9/11. Just the not even just the security effects from increased security and things like that, but also losing loved ones. I personally lost a friend, a childhood friend of mine. His name is Christopher Lawrence Brown. He died overseas in an IED explosion while he was on a patrol. So that was an emotional experience for me. Just trying to wrap my head around, first of all, him being actually gone. I mean, this guy was the life of any party. You know, he was always the guy that would put a smile on your face. He was always cracking jokes, and you know, he was just one of the funniest people I've ever had the privilege of knowing. And it's just it's really crazy how much this war and the attack itself has changed so many Americans' lives across the country. So many people are now forever changed from that experience, and not even just the people who lost their husband or their spouse or their son or daughter from the attack of 9/11, but also the following war, and how much our country is different. I mean, this one day has changed so much about our society and our culture and our laws, in addition to just the personal stories of tragedy and loss that everyone faces. So, if you're out there, listeners, if you're out there and you can relate to what I'm talking about, if you're feeling that loss today or you're thinking about it, I just want you to know, I'm with you. We have solidarity in this moment, and this isn't just a loss for you, but it's a loss for all of us. And anyway, Dan, I really appreciate you calling in and giving us your story.
Well, thanks for having me on the program. I do want to say thank you to all soldiers, service members, people in the Army, Air Force, Navy, the Marines, the Coast Guard, anybody who supports our country. And just the fact that you put your lives on the line so that we can do what we do. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about the soldiers that are guarding the wall and the fact that they put their lives on the line and the things that they suffer through. In many ways, I hate to say it, but the dead are the lucky ones that are the soldiers. But if it's your buddy gets blown up on the line next to you, and you've got to live with that for the rest of your life, or just the fact that you even have to face killing people on a day-to-day basis, the effect on your life and the sacrifices that you and your family and your friends, we cannot do enough for our soldiers. And the fact that we do so much for so many people overseas, and we cannot take care of our own soldiers inside of this country, the veterans inside of this country. We can't give them proper medical care, even, or help them with the mental illness or whatever it is. You have soldiers committing suicide all the time coming back. Mm-hmm. But, we as a country need to face the fact that we need to take care of those at home. And just a sincere thank you to all those soldiers that have lost loved ones, and to all those soldiers who have made the ultimate sacrifice, and to the families of the 9/11 victims, the innocent civilians, the children of those people, the wives, mothers, fathers, friends of all the people, the 3,000 people that died in Manhattan. I truly understand it on a level that many people don't. That's just an awesome hole in the middle of that community. People have come together since then, but to you folks, my sympathy and my thoughts and my prayers are with your family today as well.
Oh, thanks, Dan. Definitely, I really appreciate you calling in, buddy. And again, you're welcome back anytime, buddy. Thanks a lot. I'll be listening to the rest of the show. Thanks a lot. Yes, sir. Thank you. Bye, Mac. All right, guys. We're going to cut to a commercial break. When we come back, I want to focus on the aftermath of 9/11. And I want to look at not just at the personal tragedy and the effects from 9/11 on that scale, but I want to look at how it's affected our laws. I want to look at how it's affected the world itself through different aspects of the war on terror and the power vacuums that were created as a result of us withdrawing from Iraq and things along those lines. So we're going to go into this in a lot of detail. In the process, if you guys would like to call in, the MacPack phone line is still open. Give us a call. The number to the show is 360-450-5625. Again, 360-450-5625. You don't want to go anywhere. We'll be right back.
I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, pledging my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. So help me God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/OnTheMoveShow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
It was 8:46 in the morning. That's when this stopped even resembling a normal day. Chief Pfeiffer made the first official report.
We have a number of floors on fire. It looked like the plane was aiming towards the building. Transmit a third alarm. We'll have the staging area at Vesey and West Street. Right front.
As we swung around in front of World Trade, my mind tells me, wow, this is bad.
What do we do? What do we do for this?
We park right under the awning of One World Trade Center. Chief Pfeiffer puts his gear on, and I remember asking him, Chief, can I come in with you? I want to come in with you. And he says, yep.
Yeah, you stay with me.
Come in with me, never leave my side.
We got the chance.
I go in, and I hear screams, and right to my right, there was 2 people on fire, burning. I just didn't want to film that. It was like, no one should see this.
Pfeiffer was the first chief into the building. Right away, a guy from the Port Authority told him the damage was somewhere above the 78th floor. But all you had to do was look around. It was obvious. Something had happened right there in the lobby.
You just saw that all the windows were blown out.
The lobby looked like the plane hit the lobby.
I think a bomb went off in the lobby first, then a plane hit the building. Then another plane hit the other building. But when I was coming through the doors on the other side of the Trade Center, either they blew the lobby up or something, because it blew the glass out of the doors and knocked us all down, and I got smoke and everything on me. I just feel a little shook up because I got blasted, so I'm just trying to,
I worked in the building for 20 years. I was the person in charge of all the stairwells of the North Tower. And on 9/11, I had the only master key that opened the doors that rescue people. This is the master key. They call it the Key of Hope. And basically, I was a janitor. Like I said, on that day, there was an explosion on the basement. And this is prior to the building got hit by the plane. And then the plane hit, and then there was a series of explosions afterwards. And a person comes running into the office saying, explosion, explosion, explosion. His skin was pulled all from his armpits all the way to the top of the fingertips, and pieces missing off his face.
Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans.
At this point, the Associated Press with a story that says there is no report of any casualties, without jumping to too many conclusions, looking at the extent of this damage and knowing how well populated that building is at that. There's.
And the stopped audio here is the second plane hitting the tower. Several angles of the second plane hitting the tower live.
I knew we had to get up to help people. We had to get up there.
People pretty much said, "Why are y'all going up there? Get out."
Their concern was to get everybody out. That was the key. As much people out as possible.
Most of the people in Tower 1 came out on the mezzanine above the lobby. Then they'd get out through another building.
All right, I want to use the lobby of 7 as its react.
The chiefs didn't want anyone going through the lobby doors. First, it was because debris was falling outside. Then, it was people falling.
You don't see it, but you know where it is. And you know that every time you hear that crashing sound, it's a life which is extinguished. It's not something you could get used to. And the sound was so loud.
I just remember looking up, thinking, how bad is it up there that the better option is to jump?
Can you believe this? The loss of life on this day, 15 years ago, it's sickening. To think that people resorted to jumping out of windows, 70 plus stories high, I think. You know, this is something I can't even imagine being in that situation myself. Thinking that it's just better to die quickly than to be burned alive. Something I can never relate to, something I can never understand. I can never empathize with. I could never know what that's like. And I spent this morning watching several documentaries showing people jumping, trying to imagine myself in that situation, and wondering if it's something that we should do, if we should sit here and even watch these images. Is this a good way to honor them? I don't know. I was imagining if I was one of those and that was my last moments falling from one of the towers. Imagining if I would feel like I'd want those images of me to be seen. I still don't know. But I think that in the loss, in the tragedy, it's important that we do not forget what brought us to this point. Why were we attacked? And, you know, I mentioned earlier from talking to Dan, there's a lot of talk, especially nowadays, about American imperialism and how America supposedly deserved this. And, you know, just an FYI, I only hear this coming from two sides. Now, maybe there are more sides, but my personal experience on hearing this and seeing this, I only hear it from two different sides. Number one is the Muslim radicals or the the Islamicist sympathizers who think that, you know, this was a good thing. These are the ones who we saw videos of them, you know, lighting American flags the day of and the day after 9/11 on fire and stomping them in the street. You know, I remember seeing these images. I don't know if this was widespread across the Middle East, but I do remember being a 16-year-old kid watching people in other countries celebrate us being attacked. And I remember having flashes of these people jumping out of windows from the World Trade Center and thinking, somebody's celebrating this. What kind of sick, twisted person do you have to be to celebrate that? It's a rhetorical question. But the second group of people that I see that are advocating for America to be attacked, that says we deserved it, we had it coming, are these academics on the left who think that America is at fault for everything that's wrong in the world. America is to blame for every problem that we have. America needs to be taken down a peg or two. I've heard this from leftist professors in college that I've attended. People spouting Marxism on a daily basis. And people blaming America for the world's problems. These are really the only two groups I hear from this. And again, as I've said in past episodes, 9/11 was caused from a problem. It's a symptom of a problem. And that problem is not new. It's old. It's older than time, honestly. I mean, it's as old as human beings themselves. And this problem is supremacy. People thinking that they are supreme. People thinking that they are better than someone else. And therefore, they have a right to kill them. This is not an American problem. This is not a neo-Nazi problem. This is not a white supremacist problem. This is a human problem that we've faced since the beginning of time. This is a problem that we'll continue to face until we address it and really make it clear that people are not better than other people. Some people are physically stronger. Some people are physically capable. Some people are smarter than others. But people are just people. And if we stop trying to segregate ourselves, divide ourselves into these little groups, my group's better than your group. Stop going into this tribalistic kind of mindset. And don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating for global citizenship, okay? This is one of those things that I have been opposed to for the longest time. And this is another thing that's being taught in our classrooms. Global citizenship. I just saw MSNBC have a commercial for a concert for global citizenship, which I think it's a dangerous idea. Again, it's the idea of centralizing power. World government. That's a scary thought. There's some benefit to having borders, mainly because America has been the exception to the rule. Again, American exceptionalism. We're exceptional not because we're Americans. We're exceptional because America is free. That's why we've been exceptional. That's why America is what it is. That's why Americans will always find a way. We will always adapt and overcome. Because we have the ability to use our own self-interest and work towards our own ends. Work towards our goals. Not because we're a better race of people. Not because of the color of our skin. Not because of our culture, other than this culture of freedom. Supremacy is a problem. And I want you all to really think about every single issue that we've faced on a global scale. Typically, it has to do with supremacy. The Nazis, that was about supremacy. Imperial Japan, that was about supremacy. The KKK, obviously, supremacy. Muslim extremism, supremacy. most of our issues stem from supremacy. And again, the idea of Marxism itself, somebody smarter than you is going to be able to micromanage the economy in every aspect of your life better than you because you're stupid. You're just too dumb. So someone who's smarter than you, someone who's more capable than you, that person is going to tell you how you should live your life and take full control over everything. They're going to be able to tell you what school you can go to, if you can even go to school. They're going to tell you what kind of job that you can have, what kind of health care you can have. This is all about supremacy. So let's look at the aftermath of 9/11. We've obviously, if you go flying through an airport nowadays, you can tell that the levels of security have dramatically increased. And again, we're not safer because of that. It's not making us any safer. Yeah, terrorists are not as likely, I suppose, to getting onto an airplane with a weapon and taking it over. However, let's also point out that TSA failure rates are at 96% roughly of finding weapons on planes or through the security lines. And now terrorists have adapted their techniques to be able to attack us in these huge bottlenecks that we've created at the security checkpoints. We saw this in Turkey recently, where the Islamic State has attacked the security checkpoints. So now they have big lines of people that have bottlenecked up at these security checkpoints who they know are going to be defenseless and unable to defend themselves. In addition to just your everyday life, the things that are different in your life, and the excuses that you'll hear from law enforcement about trying to take away your liberty in order to make you more secure, which again, as we mentioned earlier in the show, the government cannot protect you. And in fact, they actually have a significant benefit to not protecting you because it makes you fearful, in which case you're willing to give up your rights even more. We have another caller calling in. I'm going to go ahead and put him on the line here. Hey, caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
This is Mark calling from Seattle, Washington.
Oh, hey, Mark. Thanks for joining us. We're talking about 9/11 right now, and I was wondering, would you be willing to give your 9/11 story?
Sure. First, I got a knock-knock joke for you. Knock-knock.
Oh, let's not do 9/11 or knock-knock jokes on 9/11 day. Can we not do that? I don't want.
Oh, come on! It's funny.
I really don't want to do this. It's not good. Let's not do that. So let's go to your 9/11 story.
My 9/11 story? It was 3 days before a concert that I spent about $1,000 for. It was Madonna. And one of my friends called me up and told me that I should turn on the TV because there was an attack on America. Before I knew the severity of it, I looked at her and I was like, oh my God, they're not going to cancel the concert, are they? And she was like, Mark, I don't think you understand. You really need to turn on your TV. This is like really serious. And then that's when I saw the second plane hit the second tower. Thinking to myself, oh my God, this is like way bigger than anything I've ever seen in my life. Kind of set the tone for the decade, you know?
Yeah. Were you affected by this on a personal level? Did you know anybody who was in New York at that time and potentially involved in there? Did you have that moment of panic where, oh, is this person anywhere near the World Trade Center or anything like that?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I'm a West Coast, Pacific Northwestern boy, so I didn't really have too much of a personal attachment to it, except how I had closely followed the election in 2000. And one of my first thoughts was, would this have happened had Al Gore been president? It was just one of my first thoughts. And then I started thinking, conspiracies, and then I started thinking, oh my gosh, what else could happen? And, would there be another attack right after this? And so when I went to that concert, there's going to be about 50,000 raging fans inside of a stadium, and I thought to myself, well, maybe somebody, maybe we might get attacked next, So there was a lot of, it was probably one of the first times, I think it was the first time in my life that I actually thought, wow, maybe something like this could happen to me. And when I see all of these types of calamities and disasters around the world, you never really thought like that until it hit home. Very much like the Pulse nightclub shooting for me. It was kind of like, when that hit my community, the gay community, and it was like, whoa, this actually hit me. But when there's an attack on American soil, it's the kind of thing where, it's not just something that you see on TV. It's actually something that you really witness and that you feel.
So, for it, and I don't know how you feel about this, but for me, every 9/11, especially since I'm starting to realize how important this date is historically to Islamic extremists. Do you worry every 9/11, or even throughout the year that we're going to be attacked, or when you go out to big venues like you were saying throughout the year now since 9/11? How often do you really think, this would be a soft target for terrorists to attack? How often do you think of that kind of stuff?
I don't really think about it so much when it comes to 9/11, almost because of the fact that I believe that would be, while the Benghazi thing happened, I guess, on 9/11 just a few years ago, to me, I kind of think to myself, like, this is going to be one of the most secure days, because why would anybody attack a second time? And I would think that our security sensors would be on heightened mode. But there have been several times since then, and again since some of these that nightclub shooting that happened in Orlando, that when I go into places that are larger and packed, now I start to really think and wonder, and that sucks. But it is one of those things that a friend of mine had mentioned to me, in a way, that this is a cost of freedom, and one of the negative situations that happens when you have such a free society is that sometimes you face the wrath of horrible human beings. And so, while we have stepped up and ramped up the security precautions and measures, things like this, they happen, and it's horrible, but it is also something where, would you sacrifice your liberty for that security? And where's the delicate balance?
Well, I'm assuming that's a rhetorical question, but
yeah. Actually, what do you think? You're the host, but I'm just saying, what do you think?
For me, I don't believe in sacrificing liberty for security, because I don't think that the government can provide it for you. That there are some aspects that I think that the government has a role to play in that. I think policing is an important aspect, and I think personally, I actually appreciate privatizing police departments. That's just me, but I also agree, and I can understand with public funding going towards policing. I think that there is a role for that. Also, providing for the common defense, a military. That's where I disagree with some of my libertarian friends. I think there is a role for having a strong military, but I don't think it would be necessarily if we would actually pull back and stop relying so much on foreign oil and things like that. You and I have had this conversation off air before, as far as the reason why we're so involved in the Middle East, for example, was because we are defending the petrodollar. We're defending American interest in these foreign oil markets, essentially, and if we were to withdraw from that, we would create power vacuums, which would threaten our control over the petrodollar, which would negatively affect us. So that's why we have interest there. I think that we could really scale back from these places if we just got energy independent, and then it wouldn't matter what was going on with this, and our money wouldn't be used to fund oil-rich nations like the Saudis, who aren't necessarily our friends and sometimes are working against us. And in fact, many of the 9/11 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. And I have some issues with funding despots around the world. So I would prefer it if we would become energy independent. That way, our money wasn't going to these oil-rich nations that aren't necessarily the freest places on earth, so to speak. So. But yeah, I think there are some limitations. There are some sacrifices that you can make if you're assuming that a sacrifice to your liberty is paying taxes. But I disagree wholeheartedly that you should be restricted or the government should be tapping your phone and trying to find out every single thing that you're doing on the internet, or that they can violate due process simply because you're put on some terror watch list. I believe in due process. I believe in your right to privacy. I believe in your right to bear arms. I believe in these things. And also I understand that this government was established to protect life, liberty, and property. And I don't think that it should be acting against any of those things. So if it's trying to protect your life, I don't think it should be infringing upon your liberty in the process. I think that acts against the purpose of this government's creation in the first place. But we got to cut to a commercial break. Are you willing to stick with us to the break, man? How much time you got, by the way?
Yeah, I got all the time we need right now.
Cool. All right. We'll be right back after this break, gang. I want to talk a little bit more about the aftermath. We're going to push this segment a little bit over. I want to talk more about the aftermath from 9/11, geopolitically speaking, and then we're going to dive into our second hour topics, which the featured topics for the second and third hour. I want to talk about Obama's plan. These are things, by the way, that we did not get to last week. We had a really interesting conversation, so we didn't get to these topics, but I think it's really important. I want to talk about Obama's plan to federalize the police force. I want to talk about DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, saying that they may take over the election systems, declaring it critical infrastructure. And I want to talk about how someone has been manipulating the price of gold and the protecting the Internet Freedom Act. So anyway, we'll be right back after these messages, folks. You don't want to go anywhere.
Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current active duty military, reserve, guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore, with the support of like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand with us to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help us God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/OnTheMoveShow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services, from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
All right, folks, we're back. If you want to join today's conversation, please feel free to give us a call. The number of the show, 360-450-5625. Again, that's 360-450-5625. You can get us on Twitter at OnTheMoveShow, on Facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow. Really interested to hear your stories about 9/11. The lines will be open all episode today, so please feel free to give us a call. Let us know what you were thinking, where you were on 9/11. Really interested to hear that. So, Mark, you still there?
I sure am, Matt.
All right, so I want to actually reverse that question that you had. Is there any limits as far as where you believe that we should be sacrificing liberty to ensure some kind of security?
Sure. I mean, if you think about just moralistically, you cannot be violating the rights of others, so your liberty to go and hurt somebody stops at somebody's rights. I mean, so in other words, your freedom to swing your fist stops at my nose. And I think that those are pretty basic. But when we're dealing with, when you had said a lot of your libertarian friends don't believe in a military, I don't know of any of my libertarian friends that don't believe in a military.
No.
There's a difference between an offense and a defense.
I'm not saying that my libertarian friends disagree with the existence of military. What a lot of my friends that are against this, they have issues with our overseas bases and things like that, or they want to shrink the numbers of the U.S. military troops and things like that. And for me, I personally, I don't want to just shrink the military outright without addressing the fact that we are dependent on this foreign oil, as you and I have discussed. Like, I think that if we pull out of places around the world, we will create a power vacuum, and we've already started to see the effects of Obama's creating a power vacuum by not getting involved in Crimea and things like that. And again, some of these things, I don't necessarily support that he should do. But understand the concept of hegemony. If the world power that's in control, that has the military might to enforce its will upon everybody, decides it's not going to do that anymore, you create power vacuums, and that's what we saw with Crimea, with Russia's involvement. That's what we're seeing with China and the South China Sea, and I believe even the East China Sea. This is what happens when the hegemonic power decides to pull back. You create power vacuums, and power vacuums create conflict. So if we're going to withdraw our troops and shrink our military, we have to do something about the fact that these power vacuums are going to be created, and we need to make sure that conflict that's going to result from that is not going to affect us negatively. And so far, I don't hear any plan coming from people that are saying, cut the military, close the bases. I don't hear them addressing the actual problems that are going to result from this, like the fact that we're going to lose the petrodollar, and we're not even close to being energy independent. So this is where I disagree. I'm not saying that my libertarian friends don't think that we should have a military. I'm just saying that we have a disagreement on this issue.
So I guess if I can address that really quickly, I think Obama's stance on this, if I can just, try to paraphrase for him, and I'm not on his side necessarily, but I'm just thinking, I'm very much a free trade guy, and it sounds as though as is he. I mean, he understands the economics of this, which is why I think he's for the TPP. So if you are becoming more economically interdependent as a planet and as nations build together, now, you can talk about a secret Illuminati, you can talk about a secret government, and everybody's trying to create a one world currency and blah, 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 and I can't really speak to that. But what I can talk about is the idea that if you are slowly pulling bases out of countries, and those countries you're doing business with on a major economic level, that kind of takes away the need for these types of bases, and thus would hopefully take care of that vacuum you're speaking of, those power vacuums. Now, there's no.
Hold on. I gotta challenge that point, because we're not talking about the countries themselves that we have bases in that are the threat. I'm not worried about Germany rising up and attacking the United States. I'm worried about us pulling away from NATO countries and emboldening Russia, who's building up their forces on their border and challenging U.S. hegemony and NATO themselves. Again, Russia is clearly bent on putting the old Soviet Union back together again. So if we pull away from that, that creates a power vacuum. If our forces aren't there to respond to Russian forces, Russia will just walk right in like they did to Georgia, and infiltrate like they were doing in Crimea. It's going to be the same, more of the same that we've seen underneath the Obama administration. This is the power vacuum I'm talking about. I'm not worried about Germany, rising up against the United States. It's their own country. They have a right to do whatever they want. In fact, I don't even want us to be there, but I understand that if we're not in these places, Russia will become emboldened and they'll move in.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree. That's why I think, Obama had his hands tied against Putin. I mean, when you're dealing with a guy that is, quite a stalwart, and he's somebody that is, almost a caricature of himself. I mean, just that evil kind of genius that you look at and go, how do you even deal with this guy? And, of course, you can deal with it, in terms of building, as far as building a military even more strongly, which we've increased the military budget every year since I think Obama's been president. Actually, I think we've increased the military budget every year since Eisenhower when it comes to the military budget. But it's just the idea that, this balance between how much we spend and how much that's putting us into debt, which is a part of our national security. You know, how much do we owe other nations for this military debt that we're protecting these other nations on? You see what I mean? I mean, it's the kind of thing where there are a number of factors involved in this, including jobs. I mean, you start to scale back the military. A lot of that is, you know, I mean, you start pulling all these troops back. These are jobs. You know, I mean, how are these people going to be working? I mean, you know, there might not necessarily be the private sector jobs to bring them back in.
Wait a minute. Are you referring to the U.S. military troops that are stationed overseas that we would be cutting, and where are they going to go work? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
I'm less inclined to worry about that. Again, I don't think that your government job is contingent on the fact that you need a job. I think if we don't need you for that job, then I'm not worried about it. You're not the excuse for your job, is what I'm saying. But my concern is the fact that my libertarian friends, they want to cut the military without addressing the fact that we're not. And again, many of them would agree that we should be energy independent, but they're not connecting these dots. You can't pull the rug out from U.S. hegemony without first addressing American energy independence. You cannot do it. If you do, Russia's not only going to move into these areas. Again, the question is, do you want Russia to start putting back the Soviet Union back together? If we decide, and I happen to think that, you know what, it's not our responsibility to police the world. It's not our responsibility to try to continue to push back Russia and China and all these other despots who are trying to continue to expand their territory. And that's not our job. I don't want us to do that. I want us to take less of a role in this, and I think these other countries should be protecting themselves. And if they want our help, we should make sure that these are countries that are absolutely going to back American interests. These are countries that are our friends, and not someone like Saudi Arabia, not someone like Turkey. I want these to be people who freaking love America. If we're going to send our boys and girls over there to die for this country, they better be willing to do the same damn thing, is what I'm saying. But
no, I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you at all. But I mean, I think, you know, one of the things we're not addressing is the military-industrial complex and how that iron triangle works, and how, you know, this type of a steadfast army that we're continuing to build via Congress, via industry, and then via the military is something it's proven to be unbreakable. And so there are some notions about even 9/11, and that, you know, regardless of what your theory behind 9/11 is, we should not have gone into Iraq. And we created that power vacuum by going into Iraq and toppling over. While he is a dictator and he did do a lot of really bad things, Saddam Hussein, we made a major mistake in trying to link that to 9/11.
And what happened? What happened as a result of that? Because, you know, we're talking about the aftermath of 9/11. So by toppling Saddam, what did that create?
Well, I mean, look at the factions in Iraq. I mean, you have the Sunnis, the
Sunnis and
Shia,
Shia,
the Kurds, and Shia.
Yeah,
and then, you know, and the Kurds. And so when you deal with those, you know, you had one guy, at least he was in, where, you know, he was in power. At least he had somewhat of a stronghold on the nation.
So it created a power vacuum where these factions started fighting amongst themselves. And again, I'm not necessarily advocating for us to, you know, create this huge industrial military complex where we're holding down the peace in the world, because that's what we've done. You know, it is a way to make the world a more peaceful place, if you really think about it. I mean, wars between nations have pretty much come to a somewhat of a standstill since the United States started maintaining its hegemony. But I don't think we should be playing this role, and I think you agree with that. But I don't think that you can withdraw this hegemony and weaken our military without first addressing the reasons why we need to have our bases around these places. It's like complaining that I hate having bandages on me, but without addressing the fact that I have wounds that are bleeding. The reason why I have the bandages are because I have wounds. You have to address the wounds first. You have to fix the problem before you can rip these bandages off. And
but what if they're self-inflicted wounds, Mac? What if they're the kind of wounds that you got yourself into on your own with you know, by going into these countries and meddling with them when they didn't either ask you for it or they didn't feel as though they needed it.
Give me a real world example. Tell me what you're talking about.
We'll take Vietnam. I mean, when we went into Vietnam and we tried to stop the domino theory from from communism, capitalizing on Vietnam, and we went in and basically just created havoc amongst not only, I mean, everything in that Southeast Asia area.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
I think, and another part of it is, if you look at al-Assad, over in Syria, I mean, he's got there's a real sticky situation because not only is Putin saying, look, you can't take this guy out because you're going to have some more power vacuum in there, but this is the kind of guy that has been, doing the exact same thing as, say, like Saddam Hussein did, and yet we went into war against him. And so, the lack of consistency for the lack of consistent commanders-in-chief that we have, and the lack of really having a major plan or going into things that, say we never went into Iraq, and you can't really hypothesize now, but it's like, we wouldn't have spent trillions of dollars, like maybe $2, $3, $4 trillion, not to mention the amount of interest on that debt that we borrowed. You start to look at it and go, why are we going into these wars? Why are we linking them to calamitous events?
Agreed. But wait, back to that scenario we were talking about with the bandages. The issue that we're having is we're creating these power vacuums all around the world, creating instability. We keep continually, you said, it's a self-inflicted wound. We're stabbing ourselves over and over again every time that we create a power vacuum by meddling in these other countries' affairs, because we have a stake in the regional security in these areas. And again, I think under the Obama administration, they've gone about trying to keep American interests secure in a dramatically wrong-headed direction. But moreover, if we're going to actually address the problem, again, the root cause is that we have interest in this region. And why do we? Because they have oil. And if we address the fact that they have oil and we're dependent on them for energy by becoming energy independent, then it doesn't matter what's going on in these countries. Create the power vacuum. Let whoever fill it. We don't need to be the one constantly suppressing the rest of the world's might down because we're playing world police, because we need this place to be stable so energy and oil will flow. This is the mistake. I'm against power vacuums, especially if you're trying to create peace, but if what we're trying to do is to cut our military, if that's what we want to do, fight against this military industrial complex, okay, that's great. I'm for that. Let's go ahead and do that. But let's do it after we address the root cause, why we have the bandages on in the first place. Let's not continue to create more and more power vacuums before we've even addressed the fact that we've got wounds that are bleeding right now that need to be addressed. And the wounds are caused because we're not energy independent. We have far too much regulation on our own energy productions here in our own country, and we're really holding back American energy might right now. We've got enough oil here to really, and natural gas, by the way, to put Saudi Arabia out of freaking business. And the fact is, there's so many other technologies that are being developed right now. Solar just now got to the point where they're making more money per solar panel. I'm sorry, more energy per solar panel than it cost to create. There was a deficit for the past, actually, I think since we started using solar technology, it costs more energy to produce a solar panel than you actually got throughout the lifetime of the panel. So now that's resolved, but they're trying to develop better battery technologies and have batteries that not only will save more power, but also last longer, because it's quite an investment to do this kind of stuff. Also, there's huge breakthroughs in thermal energy, using geothermal energy. There's a lot of speculation here. The guy from 5 Hour Energy Drink, he came up with this idea that you can bore down in the center of the earth, use the heat from the earth to produce steam to spin turbines, and then it's basically limitless energy. So I believe at some point here, this energy thing is going to be, it's not going to be an issue, and this is going to be America's biggest export. But if we pull out from all these overseas areas, without a doubt, we're at a minimum going to create instability in the Middle East. At a minimum, we're going to embolden Russia. At a minimum, we're going to embolden China. And there's going to be a lot of nation-to-nation conflict, which we haven't seen within our lifetime. And without a doubt, America has prevented these nation-to-nation warfares. That's why we've had a relative period of stability and peace. But the fact is, creating these power vacuums have led to more chaos, have led to it's a self-inflicted wound. As you said, we create the instability by toppling. We're trying to topple Assad, by toppling Saddam, by toppling Gaddafi, over and over and over again. We create the instability. Obama supported toppling the president of Egypt. This just continues to get worse and worse and worse without addressing the root cause of why we're there. And again, this is the aftermath. When we pulled up stakes from Iraq, we announced that we're going to be leaving on this date. So, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, who we armed in Benghazi, they go rushing into Iraq. The Iraqi army drops their weapons, runs away. They get the weapons that we left them, plus the vehicles. They end up creating the Islamic State. This is why we are here, is because of the creating of these power vacuums overseas. And without a doubt, in my mind, the world would be a much safer place if we would not have gone into Iraq. They say that Afghanistan is a good war, and perhaps it is. However, I'm not in the nation building business. I don't like that idea. I don't think that we should try to topple dictatorships, create power vacuums, and try to build up a new government. I like the idea of killing the bad guys, but I don't like the idea of going in and trying to rebuild. If we don't have an interest in that area, for example, Iraq and Afghanistan, if it doesn't matter that they are producing our oil, we go in, we blow up the bad guys, we leave. It doesn't matter what the infrastructure is. It doesn't matter what the oil, what's going on with the oil. None of that matters. So I think the real issue here is continuing to allow these nation building projects to continue. But once you do it, if you're going to pull out, like what Gary Johnson, and I'm sure I want to give you a chance to defend this. Gary Johnson wants to pull up stakes out of Afghanistan. I don't know how anyone at this point in time could advocate for leaving Afghanistan without addressing, again, the root cause of us not being energy independent. And by the way, Gary Johnson also is now supporting carbon taxes, or carbon fees is what he calls it. So he's going to make it harder for us to produce here in America energy, while simultaneously creating a less stable world and area that is where this oil is. So what do you think about that? I know you're voting for Gary Johnson, so what do you think, Mark?
Gosh, there's so much you've given me there, Mac. I mean, that was quite the monologue, and I appreciate what you're going at. But I think no, it's good. I meant that with all due respect. I think one of the things that we're looking at addressing and what you're talking about is energy independence, and I fully agree with that. Part of that to me is not only, if you remember back in 2010, Obama lifted the oil, the moratorium on drilling offshore. And it was probably within a couple of weeks, and I'm not even exaggerating, that BP had that massive oil spill off the Gulf. And, that destroyed quite a bit of the opportunity that we had, because politically speaking, this guy, obviously he's looking to win re-election, and that really hurts chances. But also it's the kind of situation where, having these kinds of energy independent modules or models that you're looking at is, it deals with switching things up. And so when you're talking about a carbon tax or carbon fees, to me it's the kind of thing is, if you can loosen up regulations here, but you do require businesses to pay for what it is that they pollute, that is pretty much the happy medium.
Hold on.
That I think Gary Johnson is getting towards.
Are you in favor of carbon fees or carbon taxes, however you want to define it?
Not in a vacuum. It has to be done with other strategic moves. In other words, the same kind of thing is, if we were to become more energy independent. Let's just go ahead and talk about this for a quick second. The first Bush, in his first term, or in his only term, he talked about a new world order. And a lot of libertarians talked about this as this massive conspiracy of getting us all in a one-world currency and massive, one-world government and all this. But I saw a documentary, and this man was talking about, the world is extremely dangerous, and while it's always been extremely dangerous, it's now getting to be a point where mutually assured destruction is no longer a factor because people are acting alone. They're acting as terrorist groups. And they're acting as though they don't give a damn about whether or not they die. And so they don't care about mutually assured destruction. And if they get their hands on a nuke, it becomes extremely difficult to stifle or to stop that.
Well, hold on. I gotta ask you a clarifying question on this point here, because mutually assured destruction still applies to Russia and China and other countries, other nations that have nuclear weapons, with the exception of Iran, who they believe that their God will basically come back if the world is on fire. But we're talking about two different things, right? Between an individual or a lone wolf or a terrorist cell getting a nuclear warhead or a dirty bomb or something, as opposed to a nuclear nation, ICBM held.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. So the New World Order is talking about the fact that we're becoming a world that it's mutually assured destruction is no longer the concern. It's no longer, countries building up their nuclear arsenal to assure destruction against another country. It's the lone wolf. It's the terrorists. It's the people who will get their hand on a bomb and who will wipe out 10, 100,000, maybe even 1 million people in a crowded area with one nuclear warhead. And so how do you handle that? How do you stop that? And primarily Bush Sr., Clinton, I don't really want to say Bush Jr. because I don't think he really knew what the hell he was doing. But Obama, all three of those, as well as Reagan, we're talking about having an economically interdependent nation so that when countries are interdependent upon one another and when organizations start to realize that their country in which they live is economically interdependent upon one another, then the only people that you have to really worry about are the religious whacknuts. Because everybody starts to realize that I'm not going to bomb somebody that I'm doing business with.
Well, how does that stop these lone wolves? I mean, economic independence.
It doesn't. What I'm saying is that when you're dealing with a new world order, or when you're dealing with this, what you're trying to do is you're trying to set up as many opportunities for free trade and as many opportunities for economic interdependence, so that those lone wolves are the only things that we need to focus on. So that if they're very targeted, they're the only people that we need to focus on. Then countries like China, countries like Russia, will start to look at these and go, we need to stop them too. And so what I'm thinking, and this is my thought process, is that the Trans-Pacific Partnership is along those same lines as NAFTA, where it's you get a bunch of countries economically interdependent upon one another, and then they can pretty much try to stifle or fight off those crazy terrorists. And you can basically centralize it into one area, i.e. the Middle East. And when everybody is economically interdependent, and when you don't have to worry about one particular area producing all this oil, then you can start producing other forms of energy in your country, such as solar, wind, or any of the other kinds of energy, nuclear energy, any of those other kinds of energy that we don't necessarily need oil for. This, in addition, would also stifle Russia's big thoughts about, continuously building, because their number one export is oil. I mean, that's their economy. Mm-hmm. And so they're hanging on by a thread here because how oil is becoming a little bit more of a scarce resource and how it's becoming a little bit more of a situation among a number of different countries. But when you're dealing with it, and you can start to go, okay, we can have a clearer picture as to what the economic interdependence is, then we can start to move forward and go, okay, we can start scaling back some of these military bases. We can start putting these people back into regular jobs. We can then start to get that economic interdependence. And then we don't have to worry about a lot of the crazy fools, coming out of the woodwork and attacking others. I mean, it's, that to me is the only way that you can really create a little bit more in terms of the world peace that I think at least our nation's leaders have been trying to do.
Yeah, I couldn't disagree more. I think that pulling away from these bases overseas instantly. First of all, in areas like Afghanistan, if we cut cut Afghanistan, if we just cut our losses there and get out, that's going to create a power vacuum. ISIS is going to fill that void, or some other.
But I didn't say instantly, Mac. I mean, I don't. It's hard for me to believe that you even heard what I just said. If you think that
I'm listening to what you're saying. So you're saying the economic independence or interdependency is going to be the real thing that holds these countries at bay from attacking, because if they attack, it's going to negatively impact their economy. Correct? That's like your main.
No, it gets everybody on the same page. Do you really think China and the United States are on the same page when it comes to terrorism? I don't.
Obviously,
I don't think I don't think they think about each other at all when it comes to that stuff. Granted, they all have veto power on the UN Security Council, but that's about all they have in common. Russia and the United States are not allies by any stretch of the imagination. But if you're starting to get it so that Russia isn't struggling simply because of oil, if you're starting to get it to the point where China and the United States are doing a lot more business, China and the areas in, say, Eastern Europe and the United States and Europe. I mean, that's the kind of situation where I think Brexit was a bad move, because it was the kind of thing where we're trying to move forward in economic interdependence versus moving backwards. And granted, time is a great equalizer, and it does heal all wounds. But a lot of times people don't realize how severe those wounds are in the midstream. And so they want to go back to the way that it was before. But the challenge with it is where if we move backwards as opposed to moving forwards towards this kind of, and I hate to use the term New World Order, but that economic interdependency, free trade amongst all nations, that's when Russia, China, the United States all start to reach across the aisle and go, look, we cannot be at odds. We have to be on the same page here. And that's when the nations can start to focus on terrorism.
Look, I agree with free markets, and I agree that to some semblance of what you're saying, as far as it does deter some people from engaging in war. But that's just it's idealism at best to think that Russia is going to be deterred from taking over Lithuania or whatever other country out there. They're going to be deterred from taking over the Ukraine simply because they have economic intertwined. Their economies are intertwined with this nation as well. They would rather absorb that country, take their resources, and be able to do whatever they want with it. Also, control pipelines that are going through with oil territory, establish new pipelines. If we left the Middle East and we just completely pulled out, for example, I have absolutely no doubt that Russia would be moving in heavy. And if they weren't, ISIS would fill that power vacuum. And again, maybe it would turn these nations more focused to the terror, the threat that individual lone wolf or terror cells pose. But again, at this point, we're talking about a real threat from nation-to-nation warfare reemerging on the world stage, because Russia won't be deterred by economic sanctions. Russia won't be deterred by any kind of interdependency between these nations with their economy. Russia will be trying to be a nationalist country, which is what they've been trying to do: secure territory, secure assets, and use them to threaten and coerce other countries to submit to them, and also threaten their military, threaten to use military force, or actually use military force, or again infiltrate like they did with the Crimea, sending special forces into Crimea, claiming that they have to protect their Russian people over there because they're being attacked. Although this is all an infiltration plan by Russia. So I think it's incredibly. And I don't want, I respect you, Mark. I just disagree. I think it's a little naive to assume that withdrawing is not going to create a power vacuum. And when you create,
I didn't say that though. I think it's got to be a gradual thing. You've got to plant the seeds now. And so I'm not saying that we need to scale back all of a sudden. And I wouldn't think that Gary Johnson, if he did win for president, would scale back all of a sudden.
Do you support his closing Afghanistan? He was saying he wants to shut down Afghanistan. So on that policy, do you support him on that?
I mean, inevitably, yes. I mean, eventually, yes. And we have to be looking at that as, not as something that, like the John McCain's of the world said, which is going to be a 100-year war. I mean, we want to get stability in a region, And we want to get free markets opened in those regions so that they could start to create an economy on their own. As opposed to heroin and oil.
So that's like nation building a little bit there?
No, I'm not saying that if we can create treaties where we're doing business with one another, we're letting free markets decide in those areas, in the surrounding areas. So if you can start to look at it and say, are we calling it nation building? I'm not necessarily saying that we go in and then impose a dictator or throw up a constitution for them. What I am saying is that when you talk about just economics, just basic economics, and you get these people, dealing in business with their neighbors, that's when people stop to worry so much about, the Jews or the Muslims or the this or the that. You know what I mean? It's like you start to worry about putting food on your table as opposed to, these crazy whack-nut religious battles we're having.
Well,
I mean, it's a long term, and it's going to take a long time, yes. But to me, the strategy of it, which is to slowly pull our troops out and quickly implement free trade agreements with a number of countries. I mean, I disagree with you that that embargoes would not. If you're putting sanctions on Russia, which we did, it crippled their economy. It hurt them quite a bit. Don't you think?
Oh, I agree, but it hasn't deterred them.
That really hurt them.
It hasn't deterred them in their desire to want to continue, sticking thumb in
I also
their
think
desire.
that Putin is such a jerk that he doesn't really this is more of a pride thing for him. And so, I think the real strategy was almost the same way that Reagan did with Gorbachev, which is just to wait it out and see who collapses first. And fortunately, we won on that one. But when it comes to this kind of thing, I think Obama was really just trying to say, hey, look, if we can put as many sanctions as possible on Russia, don't want to kick Putin out of office. And, he was facing some struggles there, but he got such a stronghold, and there's so much corruption there that's a tough one to handle. And I don't have the know-how to really even address that. I mean, I'll give you that, I'll give you that argument, but to me, the only way of really getting out of this situation is through economics and not through, military force. I mean, yeah, you're going to have military force until you have economic interdependence, but I think that that's the ultimate goal, which is, plant these seeds now, develop free trade agreements amongst all of these nations, start to really build on a capitalistic way, and then people start to go, okay, my religious dogma against this other group isn't as important as my lifestyle these days. And I think that's hopefully that it will happen.
So look, I agree with you that there is some aspect of deterrence when countries have intertwined economies. I absolutely agree with that. It's a deterrent, but deterrents don't always stop things from happening. And the reason why we don't see things that we've seen in the past, like nation-to-nation warfare on the kind of scales that we have, is because America has projected its force abroad, and it is withheld other nations from actually doing what they wanted to do abroad. And here's the thing, man.
When you say stopping them from doing what they want to do, are you talking about stopping them from doing something negative?
From attacking other countries, like Russia, for example. I have absolutely no doubt that if America pulled, let's say we just, slowly, over a 10-year period, we started closing down NATO bases, we started pulling away from our bases in Europe, it would absolutely embolden Russia. And Russia would continue to build up troops along the border, and as they started to feel like they could just push in and without having any resistance, they would. So
absolutely, I don't disagree with you at all there.
So as long as we have other nations in this world, there will always be nation-to-nation conflict that will happen as power vacuums are created, and by shutting down our bases, by cutting our military, by weakening our force projection, we're creating power vacuums on a global scale. We're not necessarily creating regional power vacuums. We could, depending on the bases that we close and depending on the regions that we abandon, but we're creating global power vacuums at that point. And I don't want us to be in this business of securing and stabilizing the world, but I also think that we have to unleash our industry. We have to unleash our energy production, get energy independent, and address a reason why we care about the fact that these other countries are stabilized. And if we're going to work and try to stabilize other nations around the world, I happen to believe that we should be careful of who we ally with. We should again, like I said, we should make very concerted effort that the people that we're going to give strategic alliances with are first of all going to benefit us. We have some reason to ally with them on that level. If they're attacked, we attack their attacker. But we also want to make sure that they're our friends. And yeah, I mean, if Germany wants us to have a strategic alliance, I'm fine with that. But at the same time, we have to get something out of that deal. And before we start creating these power vacuums, we have to address the reason why we're there. And I feel like nobody talks about this, and this is such a critical issue. And again, I don't think it's ultimately going to matter. Again, I've been saying that the economy is going to collapse, and I don't see how we continue to be the world's police and how we continue to try to provide the stability, because at some point this is all going to come crashing down. I argue by around 2018. That's what I think, but it could even be sooner. And I argue it would be if Trump gets into office, starts defaulting on our loans that he said he's going to do. He said we should default on our loans, and
not support our NATO allies,
and not supporting NATO allies. Yeah. And he wants to impose tariffs 35 to 45%. I don't know how you can do that without instantly collapsing the economy and having people question the strength of the U.S. dollar. It doesn't work that way. And
he has no concept of what it is that it takes. But then again, that's what I was talking about, though, when it comes to, if you look at, Bush Jr., who gets in, you have 9/11, and then they basically attach Iraq to 9/11 when we know that wasn't true. The whole yellow cake uranium thing was that was the reason why Colin Powell resigned. It was you remember Valerie Plume, who was outed by Dick Cheney on national TV because her husband was basically saying that there was no yellow cake uranium. I mean, they pulled a public relations scam on the people so that we could enter into a war, topple over the dictator of Saddam Hussein, simply because either of a vendetta that Bush had, or this thought that because he tried to kill his daddy, or because of the fact that he thought that, wow, we could go and get a bunch of oil out of it. So we completely botched that situation. And because of that, then the American public elects Barack Obama, who has 2 years experience in the U.S. Senate, very, very little, if any, foreign policy understanding, and runs on the idea that he's going to be pulling us out of Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, when you run on those ideas and you win, then you uphold your promises. But then when he gets into office and he realizes, wow, this is going to be a mistake if I just, pull out troops right away. Because, you've got to be in. Once you're in office, then you start to figure stuff out. Like, oh, maybe that isn't necessarily the right thing to do.
And again,
what I'm saying,
I'm not necessarily saying that we should be over there doing those things. And I understand and recognize that if we leave, it will create a power vacuum, and other actors, either independent actors like ISIS or other nations themselves, will move in to fill that void, and conflict will be a result. We'll be directly responsible from that by pulling out, but it's not our responsibility, and we shouldn't have taken it to begin with. And how we lessen the impact of this on ourselves is to become independent in our energy. I want to take a moment here, Mark, to actually focus here on the TPP. I have an article in front of me. This is written by Jeff Sessions. He's in the Senate. This is sessions.senate.gov. This is U.S. Senator Jeff Sessions, Republican from Alabama, issued a statement today. I don't know when this article was. Oh, November 2015. After the text of the Trans-Pacific Partnership (TPP) was released, Congress voted in June to fast-track the TPP before a page of the agreement had been made public. Sessions' statement follows: the text of the Trans-Pacific Partnership runs 5,554 pages. This, by definition, anti-democratic. No individual American has the resources to ensure his or her economic and political interests are safeguarded with this vast global regulatory structure. The predictable and surely desired result of the TPP is to put greater distance between the governed and those who govern. It puts those who make the rules out of reach of those who live under them, empowering unelected regulators who cannot be recalled or voted out of office. In turn, it diminishes the power of the people's bulwark, their constitutionally formed Congress. Among the TPP's endless pages are rules for labor, environment, immigration, and every aspect of global commerce, and new international regulatory structure to promulgate, implement, and enforce these rules. This new structure is known as the Trans-Pacific Partnership Commission, a Pacific Union which meets, appoints unelected bureaucrats, adopts rules, and changes the agreement after adoption. This is the part that I have a problem with, by the way, Mark, is the fact that even after we pass this thing, they can continue to change this. Anyway, it continues. The text of the TPP confirms our fears, plainly asserting the parties hereby establish a Trans-Pacific Partnership Commission which shall meet at the level of ministers or senior officials as mutually determined by the parties, and that the Commission shall consider any matter relating to the implementation or operation of this agreement, consider any proposal to amend or modify this agreement, supervise the work of all committees and working groups established under this agreement, merge or dissolve any subsidiary bodies established under this agreement in order to improve the functioning of this agreement, seek the advice of non-governmental persons or groups on any matters falling within the Commission's functions, and take such other actions as the parties may agree. So they have very, very big latitude when it comes to changing this agreement. Further, the text explains that the Commission shall take into account the work of all committees, working groups, and any other subsidiaries under this agreement, relevant developments in international fora, and input from non-governmental persons or groups of the parties. This global governance authority is open-ended. The Commission and any subsidiary body established under this agreement may establish rules of procedures for the conduct of its work. It covers everything from the movement of foreign nationals. No party shall adopt or maintain measures that impose limitations on the total number of natural persons that may be employed in a particular service sector in the form of numeric quotas or the requirement of an economic need test to climate regulation. The parties acknowledge that the transition to low-emission economy requires collective action. So again, I've told you guys time and time again that the TPP itself is a global bureaucracy that's going to have supremacy over the United States Constitution, and these people who are sitting on these committees are not going to be elected by you or me. We're not going to have any voice in that government, yet we're going to be subject to its rule, and it's going to be superseding the U.S. Constitution. This is why I don't support it. This is why I can't support it. Gary Johnson apparently can. I have issues with that. And Gary Johnson also supports the carbon fees that we had previously discussed. And Mark,
can I say something to that?
I want your opinion on this.
Because when I read through the TPP in a nutshell, basically it has 12 countries, right? I'm just reading.
How did you fit in a nutshell, Mark?
What's that?
I said, how did you fit in a nutshell? Terrible joke.
Comment.
All right. Okay, go for it.
So it involves 12 countries. You've got U.S., Japan, Malaysia, Vietnam, Singapore, Brunei, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Mexico, Chile, and Peru. So you're dealing with not only Asia, you're dealing with Australia, you're dealing with North America and South America. That's pretty broad. That's pretty vast. And while I don't know enough about it when it says that you're looking at it, taking away the U.S. Constitution, it does say that the argument could create, or, the agreement could create a new single market, something like that in the EU. Member countries are also hoping to foster a closer relationship on economic policies and regulation, and the pact aims to deepen economic ties between these nations, slashing tariffs and fostering trade to boost growth. Now, that's in a nutshell. Of course, you can read into these things, and you could, say, wow, it's going to splinter our Constitution and this and that. Is like, there are so many other things that are going to splinter our Constitution. But what I think that this is trying to move in the right direction of is that it is trying to get that economic interdependence, lowering tariffs, getting more free trade involved, getting markets to be communicating with one another. And when you start to deal with something like that, that's when it starts to become, the world starts to open up to the point where their lifestyles start to improve. People don't necessarily are not all rushing into the United States because it improves Mexico, Chile, Peru's economies. You're looking at Canada's. You're looking at, sure, mobility is a good thing when it comes to, people moving in and out of countries. But when it comes to the idea of, staying in your own country, or, are you jumping ship because of the fact that you want to mooch off the benefits of another country, this deters a lot of that. So when you're talking about, how we become more economically interdependent, or how we could become more energy independent, it's through agreements like these. Now, yes, you're a purist, and you've said this before, Mac, and so I can't, to me, perfect is the enemy of good. And when you're dealing with something, in my opinion, that this is good, you're never going to get something that's perfect out of 12 countries dealing with, multicultural, religions and multiple, languages. You're going to have an enormous amount of disconnect. But the more that you can get these people on the same page, the more peace that you're going to have, and the more economic independence, interdependence, and the more energy independence you're going to have. And I think that all of that starts with agreements like this. Sure, it's not perfect, but it definitely is better than just doing what it is that we're doing, I think.
So you said, perfect is the enemy of good. But again, I don't claim that we need perfect. I claim that we need free. We need freedom. And
well, that's getting closer to freedom, isn't it?
No, it's absolutely not closer to freedom. Giving a foreign body the power to violate the Constitution, people that aren't even elected by the United States citizens that they're going to impose regulations on, that is absolutely the opposite. That's the antithesis of free. This is what the Revolutionary War was fought over, is taxation without representation. We absolutely will have no way of impacting what is going on within this committee. We're centralizing power.
Outside of it, yes, I do understand where your fear comes when it comes to centralizing power. When it comes to the idea of regulation, to me it's much better to have the same types of regulations in a number of different countries that are doing business with one another. Because if not, then that's when you get a ton of these companies, multinationals, shipping jobs away from our country into others that don't have the same kind of regulation. So if we can get everybody on the same, up to the same speed, everybody on the same level when it comes to those regulations, then people don't necessarily need to move jobs outside of the country. And so when you're dealing with it, yes, you and I and a number of other...
I need some clarity real fast.
Sure.
These regulations you're talking about, so you're saying that other countries should have similar regulations to the United States. And correct me if I'm wrong. I want to make sure I'm not
saying should. What I'm saying is if we did have similar regulations, it would be very difficult to justify shipping a bunch of jobs outside of this country for a corporation who we know that that's expensive. You have to hire, train, and develop people from other, developing nations. And that is expensive, but it's still much less expensive than paying people here the same kind of minimum wage.
Don't you think that the better answer, the solution here, the free market solution would be to get rid of our regulations and let those other countries do whatever they're going to do, and rather than trying to impose a global bureaucracy that is going to be able to dictate regulations in foreign countries that the voters of that country have absolutely no ability to elect the people that are imposing their will on them. Again, I think that the free market answer is getting rid of our regulatory burdens that we're unnecessarily putting on our own economy. We're not producing anything here, and the reason why jobs are going overseas is because we have far too much regulatory burden on our citizens here and on our businesses. I
would agree. That's exactly what I said.
No, from what I understand you saying is that we've got a lot of burdens. So how about we make sure that everyone else has the same burdens and make it fair? That might be fair, but it's certainly not free.
Okay, fair enough. That really wasn't where I was going, but I see how that's where you're going. I don't know enough about this to really hammer down into major details. When you're talking about creating a bureaucracy that supersedes our constitutional rights, on its surface, of course, it would oppose something like that. when I drill down to if I drilled down into the details and I started seeing something to the effect of, okay, wow, this, maybe it isn't so bad, and maybe it can be, maybe there is an agreement that could be taking place that would be, just, in my opinion, it lowers the amount of regulations that the United States has so that we can compete with those other countries that have lower ones. And that's the reason why I think a lot of the Bernie Sanders crowd oppose something like this.
There's no way to even know that, though, because, again, this body can change all of the regulations on their own. They're not required to consult with us on this process. I mean, we have a vote just like everyone else. We have our representatives there, from what I understand of this thing. Again, some of this stuff is secret, and we can't even see all of the agreement. And again,
well, Mac, it's only 5,500 pages. So
yeah,
why don't you get on it?
Yeah, I mean, I've got all day. Let's break this thing down, Mark. But look,
you're a poli-sci major. Come on, let's figure it out.
Look, this is the kind of thing. Again, I argue that these the Constitution never ever granted the Congress the power to supersede the Constitution through trade deals. Never. That is absolutely not within their power. So our Congress doesn't even have the ability to get onto this agreement, yet they're going to do it anyway, most likely. And again,
let me ask you this. Do you think that this is a sinister move on the part of these governments to create a one-world government so that they can dominate our freedoms and our liberties? Or do you think that this is a kind of a solution that they're trying to make to create better in their own minds?
I think that many people think this is a better way, but again, I think many people think that collectivism is the right path to choose as opposed to individualism. But
that's fair too.
But I do contend that there are people, and I'm not saying that there's a secret shadow government. I'm saying that people work within their own individual interest, what they think benefits them. And I think people like George Soros absolutely are working towards collapsing the U.S. economy and setting up these kind of economic global trade deals that will replace U.S. hegemony. This is individuals who are working to make this stuff happen for different reasons, but some of those individuals want to collapse the U.S. and replace it with these regional governments or even global governments, and they think that they're going to be the ones that benefit from that global centralization of power. This is, again, I don't believe it.
It's interesting you should say that. I read a book of George Soros about the crash of 2008, and he seemed like a pretty sane individual. I mean, the guy is a billionaire because of how he manages a hedge fund. So he knows markets. He knows how markets work. He knows how to play the indices. He has a firm understanding of how capitalism works, and he's profited very well from it.
Yeah, he's also profited from admittedly toppling governments, manipulating currencies to destroy governments and to gain power. He bets against currencies and collapses currencies. He's done this. And this is the guy that during World War II, he took part in rounding up Jewish people and sending them to the camps. And again, he
George Soros did this?
Yes, it's admittedly, and he will not apologize for it. He says, this is what I had to do to survive. I have absolutely no guilt about it. And he's on record saying that the only thing that is preventing a new world order is the United States. So he's actively placing bets against the United States. That's why he's donated over $30 million to Black Lives Matter and things that are going to continue to create tension here. That's why he's currently making bets against the U.S. dollar. This is a very scary dude. I highly recommend that you do a little bit more research on him and some of his history on this, because he's a very, very scary dude. And again, he makes no attempts to hide what he's actually doing. He says what he means, and he does what he's trying to advocate for. So he puts his money where his mouth is. And I believe that he thinks this way because this is what he says. I listen to the words that he says. So, again, I don't believe that there's, a cabal within inside the United States government that's actively trying to topple it. I think some people, genuinely think that collectivism is the answer and our salvation. And I think that the people who are drawn to these kind of collective powers, the centralized powers, are corrupt. And look at Hillary Clinton, for example. And look at, again, we covered on one of our previous episodes, the effects of Mao. collectivizing all property, abolishing wages and money, and having full control over every aspect of people's lives, to include that they even outlawed the ability to cook food in your own home. You had to go to a cantina in these communes controlled by cadres, which were basically the commune officers, to get food. And they literally controlled everything to include your ability to eat. And if you stepped out of line, if you weren't able to work, you didn't eat. And it resulted in the Great
Look at
Famine.
how that resulted. With 20 million people dead on his hands. Obviously,
some estimates include up to 55 million dead. So again,
okay, 55 million. What is it? One person's death is a tragedy. A million is a statistic. Joseph Stalin. You're dealing with things that have happened, and I understand that they weren't in the too distant past. But I think we're kind of beating a dead horse here. I think the idea that, yes, we both agree that economic interdependence is going to be, is going to be as a result of energy independence. And how do we get that energy independence? I think it might be where you and I might disagree, or how to take the proper steps towards it. But I think when you're dealing with free trade, when you're dealing with open markets, those are the kinds of things that I think we're both on board with.
What do you think other countries depend on us for?
Military security.
So if we withdraw that, what are they depending on us for?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's the problem, Mark. But anyway, folks, we got to cut to a commercial break, Mark. We'll be right back after this break, gang. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, I want to dive into these featured topics, and let's cover them real fast here. I want to talk about Obama's plan to federalize a police force. I want to talk about the DHS, how they're going to try to take over the election system. They're naming a critical infrastructure. Again, this is centralizing more power. I want to talk about how someone is manipulating the price of gold, and the Protecting Internet Freedom Act, sponsored by Ted Cruz. We'll be right back after this break, gang. You don't want to go anywhere.
I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, pledging my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. So help me God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/OnTheMoveShow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services, from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
All right, we're back. Before we dive into our featured topics here, I want to actually talk about something that has been making headlines here with Hillary Clinton supposedly fainting at the 9/11 memorial service that she went to today, commemorating the 15th year anniversary of 9/11. And this is all swirling around the fact that a lot of people have been questioning her health, and to include Donald Trump. So, Mark, I actually want to ask you, what do you think about this whole situation?
I'm a little scared. I would rather it be a fair battle between two horribly unqualified candidates than basically somebody defaulting because they have pneumonia or Parkinson's or whatever she has. I mean, I guess they said that she has pneumonia, but she did collapse. She's had a number of these battles with her coughing fits and with, I mean, not even being able to get in and out of a chair or her, motorcade. And so I'm honestly a little bit afraid, not because of the fact that I want her as my president, but because I don't want Donald Trump as my president so bad that, to me, it's the kind of thing where I'm going, what's going to happen? I mean, what would happen if she couldn't make it? Would that just be Tim Kaine? Would he just take over?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on what stage of the process here. But yeah, Tim Kaine, he hasn't actually received the nomination, so no, it wouldn't be him. They would have to they would have to nominate someone else again. I don't know if that would require a vote from the party, or probably I'm imagining it would actually be the actual bureaucrats of the Democratic Party who would actually be the ones to select that. I don't think it would require a vote of the people. Again, maybe I'm wrong on that. You'd have to actually look at the party rules, but no, it wouldn't automatically go to Tim Kaine.
Interesting. Yeah, but I mean, what do you think? I mean, I've looked I've looked at some of these YouTube videos about her health, and it looks pretty scary. I mean, when people are talking about Parkinson's, I don't want to necessarily shine so much light on that because, as much as I don't like Hillary Clinton, I don't want to, speculate on somebody's health or disrespect their health when they're going through a problem like this. But to me, that's really scary stuff. I mean, what do you think?
Well, again, I think it's definitely a question now that is not just a conspiracy theory anymore. You can't really, sit there and say, "Oh, she's fine. There's nothing wrong with her." That she's on film, and I've seen the video. I played it several times today. I was looking at it over and over and over again, saying, "Did she really just drop dead weight? She went boneless on these people?" I mean, I sit there and watch her.
Yeah.
And apparently she lost her shoe here. In fact, I got a clip of them talking about this footage. I'll go ahead and play it real fast.
And John, before we get to that, I wanted to bring our viewers up to date on a story that is breaking right now that I just learned about within the last 15 or 20 minutes. As you know, there are many dignitaries gathered at the scene, including Republican nominee Donald Trump and the Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton, who was at Ground Zero, was there for the ceremony, and left unexpectedly, left early because of what appeared to be a medical episode. I have a law enforcement source who was there, who was 15 feet away from Hillary Clinton. He says she was standing on a curb with her protective detail waiting for her motorcade. They were surprised to see her because she wasn't supposed to be leaving yet, so they had to wait for the motorcade 2 or 3 minutes. When it finally rolled up, my source says she stumbled off the curb, appeared to faint, lost one of her shoes that wound up underneath the van. Her protective detail, I'm told, helped her into that van, and then the van took off, presumably in the direction of a hospital. They grabbed her shoe and flagged down the rest of her detail. Her shoe was given to that detail who was following the other two vehicles, and they left Ground Zero early just moments ago because of some apparent medical episode that Hillary Clinton was suffering. It's not terribly hot today, John. It was warm, certainly warm at the scene. But again, Hillary Clinton, my source, was 15 feet away, says she appeared to be having some sort of medical episode, had to be helped into her van, and left Ground Zero early before this ceremony ended, apparently because of a medical problem.
So again, it's not necessarily a hot day in New York today, and again, this is being reported at 10:11 a.m. It couldn't have possibly been that hot there, and to be hot enough to where somebody would be dehydrated and pass out, and I definitely think that it does put a lot of speculation or some some validity into the claims that are being made from the Trump camp that Hillary Clinton isn't physically capable enough, and I do think this is actually something that could propel him into the White House potentially if this gets spun the wrong way or right way, depending on how you look at it.
Well, it is. It's kind of thing. I mean, think about that. I mean, if being the president, it's not a stress-free job by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
It's probably the most responsible job on the planet, maybe the chair of the Federal Reserve. But either way, you're not dealing with somebody who can be unhealthy in that position. And both she and Trump are nearing 70 years old, which to me is just, I'm not saying I'm ageist where you can't do the job, but it makes sense that health problems start to ensue during that time of your life. And, to have something as stressful as running for president, I mean, part of me is almost like this is kind of a train wreck that we're all kind of going, oh, I don't know if we want to watch it happen. But, I mean, what would happen if she fainted on the debate stage? I mean, gosh, could you just imagine?
It would make for great TV. I want to actually...
That's what I mean. I don't mean to be so crass, but it's kind of like one of those... I almost want to see it, but then I don't. But then wouldn't it be almost like instantaneous, like she collapses and then Trump has a heart attack on the same debate stage, and then Gary Johnson's like, all right, de facto, I'll just take the presidency.
Can you see, like, her fainting and Donald Trump, like, standing over her, giving the thumbs up? Like, it would just be, like...
No doubt. God, that guy is such a pompous jerk that he'd probably, take all, like... He'd probably just whip out his BlackBerry right there and start tweeting about it. And going,
like taking selfies over her body.
Hillary? Yeah, no doubt. Like, crooked Hillary's crooked bent over. Oh. You can't even get up.
Oh, man.
Like, I mean, he's so crass that he doesn't even, like, have any kind of semblance of, tact.
Can you imagine,
he'd be the first guy that would do that.
You imagine him saying, like, yeah, I have that effect on women, Like,
yeah, no doubt. You'd be like, you're fired. I'll go ahead and take this job thing.
Oh, gosh. So let me actually, I want to play a clip here, because you mentioned the age issue, and it always reminds me when anybody talks about a president's age, Ronald Reagan talking to his opponent in a debate about his age.
Yeah.
Here's the clip.
You already are the oldest president in history, and some of your staff say you were tired after your most recent encounter with Mr. Mondale. I recall yet that President Kennedy had to go for days on end with very little sleep during the Cuba Missile Crisis. Is there any doubt in your mind that you would be able to function in such circumstances?
Not at all, Mr. Truitt, and I want you to know that also I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience.
So yeah, I mean every time we talk about age of a presidential candidate, I think about this clip. I think it's funny. So
yeah, it is. I mean, but that's the thing is that when was Reagan inaugurated? He was inaugurated at 68, and then reelected at 72. Is that right?
I'm sorry. So, I don't know. I don't know exactly. I can find out. I mean, let me find out. Go ahead, keep talking.
Google that, but yeah, I mean, it just seems to me that as though, I mean, the health and the age of the president is they're important factors in who our leaders are, and when you deal with, say, the last three presidents who were all elected in their 50s, I think even this Bush Jr. was elected in his late 40s. Actually, I think Clinton was maybe 50, and then I think they're all elected in their 40s. So, Bush Sr. was in his 60s, yes. Reagan was in his 60s/70s. But, I think, we're looking at a more spry and more, necessarily stressful position that, you've got to be, you can't be weak in this. And that was one of the major things that, John Kane had going against him is that he, we were if he were to be elected, we were one fragile heartbeat away from having Sarah Palin as president. And I think that scared the bejesus out of a lot of people, considering John McCain may have been qualified, but certainly not Sarah Palin. And so I think people definitely take the health of a candidate into consideration, especially when they're dealing with, say, even a running mate.
So just to put it out there here, I'm looking at Wikipedia, and this is obviously not a scholarly source, so you guys take this for what it is. It says the oldest president to assume office was Ronald Reagan, who was 69 years old when he assumed office, and was the oldest in office at 77 years old when he left.
77.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, it's interesting to talk about, but yeah, I don't know what's if Hillary is really suffering from pneumonia or some greater complicated issue. I'm more inclined to believe that she's obfuscating some health issue, because I don't see the Clinton machine stopping on the account of Clinton's health. I don't. I think they're going to push through it. They'll hire some complicit doctor to write some false report about some. And this is also another reason the medical reports I hear from her are so detailed. It feels like somebody who's lying to you, and they're telling you way too big of a lie, way too detailed of a lie, when when just no big deal. I was coughing kind of thing happened. It just seems way too detailed for it to be truth coming from somebody who doesn't like talking to the media and has done everything in their power to keep the media away from them, to include roping them in these little media only areas that are hundreds of yards away from where she's actually going to be. So that's just my opinion.
It's interesting because if you think about like how the Clintons were, I mean they were geniuses in their time. I mean Bill Clinton ran one of the most genius campaigns of all time when James Carville had "It's the Economy, Stupid." You had a situation where he exploited the Bush seniors' "Read My Lips," "No New Taxes." You had Ross Perot in the elements there. And there were a number of things that Clinton campaign did that were so effective that are not effective today, especially because we have the internet.
Yeah.
And I think that they're of this old school mentality that they can continue winning these races with doing the same kinds of things that they did before, but we're in a completely different political landscape now. Whereas what Obama did so well that Romney and McCain did not is that really ran an internet campaign. And that's something that Bernie Sanders was doing really well, that Clinton isn't. And so I think, it's very incumbent upon the Democratic Party to show some responsibility in this if they did know about her health. Because to me, it's the kind of thing of saying, look, we elected the first woman president just regardless of her character or regardless of her health, just because of the fact that we wanted, A, the power, and B, to say we elected the first woman president, versus saying, maybe we should rethink this thing, or maybe we should put out somebody that really, has a chance of surviving the 4 to 8 years that he or she is in office for.
So I want to shift the conversation here to another topic. Let's go to the federalization of the police, and I just want to read a quick story here from the Blaze. This is dated August 4th, 2015, written by Susan Calloway Knowles, and the article is titled "Phase 2 of Obama's Plan to Federalize the Police Force Just Happened in Baltimore." Let me skim through this here a little bit here. In Phase 1 of the federalization of the police, we saw many key players come to the forefront. Al Sharpton was the first to call upon the president to federalize the police. During the rioting in Baltimore, he demanded that the Justice Department take over policing this country. So again, that'd be a federal police force instead of local governments or state governments being able to police their own. Sharpton went on to say, "We're going to have to fight states' rights in terms of closing down police cases," Sharpton added. The second and third and fourth actors who helped to make the Phase 1 possible were the mayor of Baltimore, Stephanie Rawlings Blake, who requested that the DOJ conduct a full-scale investigation of her city after City Council President Bernard C. Jack Young and 10 members of the City Council bypassed Rawlings Blake and sent a letter directly to the Attorney General Loretta Lynch. The stage was set and the script was written. The DOJ and the Obama administration had at last been invited in and assigned the lead role in creating a stronger, better Baltimore, according to Lynch. There was now a clear path to the long sought-after federalization plan. Former Attorney General Eric Holder attempted the same federal takeover of the police force in Ferguson, but his efforts failed when the police officer involved in the shooting was not indicted by the grand jury. However, circumstances in Baltimore, primed by all previous actors, including Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby, who some claimed tried to have appeased the rioters by overcharging the police officers involved, had played their part as well. So I want to move to this conversation. Actually, I want to throw this back at you, Mark. And I understand, you're not an expert in this subject, but I'm just curious on the idea as a libertarian in philosophy. How do you feel about having a federal government police force and removing the states and local governments' ability to have their own police departments?
At their surface, I'm absolutely 100% opposed to it. I think that, you're dealing with a police state as it is, and I think one of the cruxes of the Black Lives Matter movement is that we're becoming a police state and that they are unfairly targeting a race. Now, I know you and I might disagree on that, but I think we both agree on the fact that
let's not go into
when
that.
You're talking about a well, I think I don't see why not. I mean, that's one of the major reasons why we've
covered this. We've beat this dead horse repeatedly. Let me actually ask you, rather than that, why is it you think that Black Lives Matter advocates are actually advocating for the federalization of the police if their issue is that we have too much of a police state as it is? Why do you think that they're advocating for that?
Because I think most people are narrow-minded when it comes to government. They look at the federal government as being the sexy, cool government that everybody pays attention to. Presidential politics, congressional hearings, Senate debates, those kinds of things are much more interesting and intriguing to people. And people believe as though somehow they're being taken care of when you have the federal government stepping in. And so when it deals with any situation on any level of government, people generally look to the federal government first before they look to a state and local government. Whereas I'm exactly the opposite, whereas I think most of my libertarian brothers and sisters, hopefully including yourself, look at it as the opposite. Local control first. People, local politicians, local police force, local firefighters, local public servants, all know their communities much better than do some, senators or congress people 3,000 miles away. In addition to that, when they say all politics is local, it's the idea that it's more on the accountability end, where, if you're dealing with a sheriff who's corrupt in his or her department, well, then it's a lot easier on a local level to throw that person out, because you can start talking to your neighbors and you can feel as though you're actually making an effort, you're making some kind of progress when you're coalition building and trying to boot somebody out of office. Whereas it's much more difficult to do something like that on a federal level.
Exactly.
And so if I think Black Lives Matter is pushing for something like this, I think it's only because of that narrow-mindedness that I look at with anybody who looks first to the federal government to solve the world's problems or to solve their problems versus looking within themselves and then looking within a local or community neighborhood type of coalition or, community organization or something like that.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think that all government should be at the lowest level possible, and again, that's...
What about defense?
Again, the lowest level possible. So what would that be?
Okay.
What would that entail?
Sure.
I think that's a state militia issue. States should have militias from the people, regulated by the states themselves. And I disagree with the need. Again, if we have energy independence, if we actually address the issues that are causing us to export, again, even from what you say, our biggest export is military might. And if we instead actually have an export, actually have industry, because again, I think that we in America, we are entrepreneurs, we are people that can find a way. And again, I don't think that slaves can compete with free people. So I think if we're unleashed, our self-interest is unleashed, and the government isn't holding us back, and they finally remove that throat that's been on our neck for so long, we'll be able to find the areas of specialization that we're good at. We're never going to be able to compete against China making diapers. We're never going to be able to do that, and nor should we, because there's no money in it. We should be at the forefront of technology, at the forefront of energy, at the forefront of health. Those are the things that we should be pushing, and other areas where we're able to compete. Those are great things, but by focusing on centralizing power and back to this federalization of policing here, I think again it's the worst possible solution to the answer to the problem here. Is that you think if we believe that there are corrupt police officers or corrupt institutions and police stations or corrupt local governments or state governments, and we think that there's a threat from them, why on earth would you want to make the Leviathan that they answer to even bigger and harder for you to effect change in? As far as on the lowest level, we were talking about the national defense. Again, I think that if we're producing and we unleash our markets, we're going to be able to actually stop holding other nations back from fighting each other. It's not our job. If one nation wants to take over another nation, that doesn't concern us as long as it doesn't affect our national security. And I think we should stop playing that game. But we can only do that if we are energy independent and we have our own security here at home, which again, I think state governments is a great thing, but for the federal government, you have to have a Navy. You absolutely have to have a Navy. And I think even you have to have air defense. So, a United States Air Force, a United States Navy. I think there's a role for that. I even think there is some limited role in having an Army or Marines to actually, project force in areas that we want to overseas, in areas where we have friends. But again, nationalizing the police, back to that. I think this is the worst possible situation. You're going to centralize power, and again, I am against the centralization of power. I am the reason why, as you previously stated, I like the idea of being able to affect my local government, and it's far more easy for me or a group of people to affect local change, and to include Black Lives Matter. If Black Lives Matter actually thinks that there's a problem with the corrupt police department, it's so much easier for them to affect pressure and affect change on that department than it is for them to affect change and put pressure on the federal government. That our White House gets 100,000 signatures on petitions all the time, and they just ignore them. So you're not going to be able to make the change that Black Lives Matter wants on that kind of level. And again, I continue to articulate the point that they obfuscate what the real issues are. My disagreement with Black Lives Matter is where the root causes are. They continue to address the symptoms, where I continue to address the root cause. But I think you and I see eye to eye on this. Would you agree, Mark, on the federalization of the police? That is not Black Lives Matter. I know we disagree there.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Absolutely. No, and I think, it's I just hadn't even heard of this kind of thing in terms of federalization of police. And to me, it's, I wonder why. I mean, I constantly check a number of different news sources. So I'll look at Reason, I'll look at Cato, I'll look at Fox News, I'll look at CNN, I'll even look at, I'll look at some Yahoo and some Google News, I'll look at, Apple News. I look at a number of different news from different news sources, especially more politically slanted. And I've never heard anything like this. So, this is the kind of thing where, one, it kind of freaks me out, but two, it's also the kind of thing where I'm like, is this paranoia, or is this like an actual thing that you think might actually happen?
I believe that the federal government wants to do this. I don't know if it will happen. I think they're going to continue to try to do that. I have heard Obama actually talking about creating a federal police force, and again, he was saying that we need to have a domestic essentially army. I can't remember the words for it here at home that rivals our military. This is one of the reasons why.
Well, isn't that the Department of Homeland Security though?
Yeah,
isn't that the kind of
exactly
thing where that to me is where and that's the thing is that on 9/11, I don't want to get all conspiracy theorists on this stuff, but to me it's the kind of thing where it's like, all of the things that happened after 9/11. I mean, the Patriot Act, where the government can spy on you and tap your phones, basically do anything that wants to, provided that the president calls you a terrorist, and the president alone. So they can pretty much get any kind of warrant for anything, just provided that the president thinks you're a terrorist.
Here's a
and
clip
so that puts all of the power into that hand of that particular person. And then you see a number of other things that happen, like the Iraq War, which we all know we shouldn't have done, Afghanistan, which, maybe we should have, or maybe it was the only retaliation. But then we start to see all of these other things, like, look at the militarization of our police. I mean, look at how police these days have tanks and body armor and all of this stuff where you're like, what does a police officer or what does the police force need all of that stuff for? I mean, with the exception of the drug war, which I think both of you and I can agree is a ridiculous war against its own people, there's no reason why the police need something like that.
Agreed.
And so that, to me, is where it's getting, maybe that is the inevitable next step, where they're just, they're coming up with this and saying, wow, local police forces can't do anything because look at how many people know Black Lives Matter think so. So let's just go ahead and use that as a strategy to, take over the police force across the country. I hope that's just paranoia coming from both of us, because it sounds pretty damn scary to me.
I can't find the clip of Obama actually talking about the federalizing the police right now. I've heard him talk about it before, so I know it exists, but I do have the clip here of Obama talking about a civilian security force. Here we go.
We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well-funded.
So this is the kind of things that I'm concerned about. Again, what was that?
That's scary. That's about the worst thing I think I've heard about from that guy's mouth in years.
Yeah. So again, I'm not necessarily saying that there is a cabal that is trying to centralize power, but I do think that so many people continue to resort to Marxist ideology that think that that the rights of the collective are more important than the rights of the individual, and I also think that there are individuals who think it's within their self-interest to collectivize this power because they'll be able to use it for their own ends. And again, this is a continual chipping away of state sovereignty, which again I think this is a foundational concept of our nation. Each state was supposed to be essentially their own nation. That's why they were called states, their own nation state. And this was essentially a coming together of friends for common interests. We would defend each other, we would have mutual protection pacts, and we would encourage commerce, and we wanted to have a limited federal government, but that's just going out the window. It just seems like as more time goes on, the more power that will continue to centralize, and the more that we trample the Constitution and states' rights.
Yeah, pretty scary stuff. I mean, that's, to me, I mean, one of the things that I really have loved about the Obama administration is that he's exonerating or pardoning a number of these nonviolent drug offenders. And I mean, granted, there's only been about 100 that he's let out of prison, but to me, that was a great start because we've constantly looked at the drug war as like this war against our own people, and yet we needed to stop it, or we needed to win it. And to me, this is the first president that actually addressed that and said, no, this is not good. But to me, the only reason why one would have a militarization of the police force is for something like the drug war, because otherwise, I mean, I guess if you're talking about domestic terrorism, but, with the exception of a few, would you call that guy who shot up that Black Southern church terrorism? Would you call that guy who shot up the Pulse nightclub terrorism? Or would you just call the people who are Muslim terrorism? Well, I guess the guy that shut up the Pulse nightclub was too. But
yeah,
to me, it's like, what do they call terrorism versus an act of hate? And I don't know. I'm delving too much. Sure, I'm reaching too far into the future about what we are going to consider this for. But to me, it's pretty scary.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you've covered a lot there, so let me focus here. I think that the first thing that you mentioned was the dealing with terrorism. Well, actually, that was the second thing, but let me touch on that here. Dealing with terrorism. I think it wouldn't be as necessary if people were able to defend themselves. If you had the right everywhere you went to carry a gun, we wouldn't need a national police force. We wouldn't need a national civilian security team that was there to keep you safe. Because, again, the government can't keep you safe. They just cannot keep you safe from every threat. And as you even said, it's a price of freedom. That's the price of freedom. And even more so, you're actually safer in a country where you have this price of freedom, this risk of being free. Because, again, if we see what happens in these totalitarian regimes, we have 55 million, that die from great famines in China. We got things that happen all over where Marxism rears its ugly head. You're actually less safe. Governments kill more people than the supposed threats that they're trying to actually keep us safe from. But in terms of you talked about Obama with his pardons and whatnot. I think this just shows how disingenuous he really is about this issue. This is putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. You start freeing. It's amounting to about 300 people now for these nonviolent drug offenses. When the DEA, they just had an opportunity just a few months ago to reschedule marijuana, and they chose not to change the schedule of marijuana.
Yeah, I was really upset about that one. I don't understand, especially from a president who talked about doing lines of blow in a book that he wrote.
Exactly.
And the prior president to him, George W. Bush, who pretty much everybody knew as a cokehead. And then if you've seen any documentary on Bill Clinton, I guess he was a total coke fiend. And so you're talking about three presidents in a row. I'm not going to go into the idea that Reagan or Bush Sr. were cokeheads, but all I'm saying is that the hypocrisy and the amount of drug use and abuse in politics that I've seen my own self as a candidate for office, when I saw a lot of people partying with that kind of stuff, I'm like, if anybody in those rooms ever got busted for something like that, they would never have a future in it. But yet so many of them are doing it, and that's the reason why I'm just so flabbergasted at why he didn't choose to loosen up the reins on the way that we treat pot.
It's because he's disingenuous. He doesn't really believe in this. This is a political stunt to garner favor among minorities and among people who he thinks this is going to they're going to be sympathetic to this issue. I absolutely do not believe that Obama gives two craps about people being put in jail for nonviolent drug offenses. And if he did, he would have rescheduled the marijuana, and it would not be federally illegal. He would leave it to the states, and that would be that. But again, he doesn't care. He's disingenuous about it. He has absolutely no problem trying to use his executive orders to wave his magic wand and make 11 or 22 million illegal immigrants here legal. He has absolutely no problem trying to use executive orders for all sorts of other nonsense. But yet he won't use it to restrain the federal government from making something that grows naturally in the ground and has hundreds of thousands of uses, positive for medical purposes and industrial purposes. He won't make that just something that the states can decide for themselves. But I digress. I mean, again, I just think he's disingenuous on this issue. But let's move on. Let's talk about another topic here: more centralization of power. And Mark, I really want to pick your brain on this one because I haven't talked to anybody on this issue, and to me, I just hear big alarm bells and red lights flashing, saying warning, warning, warning when I see a news article titled DHS, we may declare election systems critical infrastructure. This is on Town Hall, and they're talking about how they feel that there's a risk here of some kind of election tampering from Russia or other foreign agents. So now the federal government needs to take over this infrastructure and take complete control of the election systems. I think that putting this in the hands of the federal government, the same federal government that just decided not to prosecute Hillary Clinton, by the way, for her clear pay-to-play politics, her clear accepting bribes from foreign countries, her clear taking money from people like George Soros in order to change her policies, and other, as a sitting member of the State Department, leading the State Department. This is very concerning to me. What do you think, Mark? Do you think the federal government should be in charge of our election systems?
For any kind of maybe oversight on a national election, I don't see. I'm not saying oversight is a different thing than taking control. Like if there's some kind of ultimate body, like what Florida did when it comes to the U.S. Constitution or the Supreme Court, where it's just like, okay, Florida in 2000, had to take it all the way to the Supreme Court. So that to me is something where there's a federal oversight to it, where if a state has an issue and they believe there's corruption, then they can take it all the way up to the federal government or to the Supreme Court. But when you're dealing with one federal kind of election situation, absolutely not. That's the reason why we're the United States and not just one country. I mean it's the sovereignty and the individualism is a much more prevailing factor.
They're not talking about that. They're talking about not necessarily trying to have the federal government in charge of every single election, state or local, but they are saying that we should consider that. But at a minimum, they're talking about for federal elections. And again, I mentioned the corruption with Hillary Clinton, but this is also the same federal government that used the IRS to target the Tea Party during an election year. This is the same federal government that ran guns to known smugglers for the cartel and resulted in the death of border agent Brian Terry. This is the same federal government that has been doing these kind of shady dealings year after year. It seems like we're getting exhausted with scandals. I don't trust this federal government as far as I can throw them, and I don't want them to have the power to change the results of elections. They're saying here, and this is on a bulletin here, this is on the article, it says the bulletin does not identify the targeted states, but officials told NBC News they were Illinois and Arizona. Illinois officials said in July that they would shut down their state's voter registration after a hack. State officials said Monday the hackers downloaded information on as many as 200,000 people. State officials told Chicago Tribune they were confident no voter record had been deleted or altered. In Arizona, officials said hackers tried to get in using malicious software but were unsuccessful. The state took its online voter registration down for 9 days beginning in late June after malware was discovered on county election officials' computers, but the state concluded that the system was not successfully breached. They went on to say we should consider, this is from, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson. He says we should consider carefully whether our election system, our election process is critical infrastructure like our financial sector, like the power grid. Homeland Security Jay Johnson said, there's a vital national interest in our election process, so I do think we need to consider whether it should be considered by my department and others critical infrastructure, he said at a media conference earlier this month hosted by Christian Science Monitor. DHS has a vital security role in 16 areas of critical infrastructure, and they provide a model for what the department and Johnson could have in mind for the election. DHS describes it in this way on their website. There are 16 critical infrastructure sectors whose assets, systems, and networks, whether physical or virtual, are considered so vital to the United States that their incapacitation or destruction would have a debilitating effect on security, national economic security, national public health or safety, or a combination thereof. And let me just point out, I just want to mention here that just because the federal government takes over, it doesn't make it safer. Again, the Pentagon's been hacked. We've already seen, for example, the Democrat National Party, their computer systems were hacked. Obviously, Hillary Clinton's systems were hacked. The federal government is you're just creating a bigger target to be hacked. I don't understand how anyone can think that centralizing these systems and putting them into one bigger target, a bigger conglomerate, is going to make them any safer. Mark, what do you think?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's sad that I don't have really much more input on it because it's such a serious issue. But I mean, the thing that troubles me is that not only in the 2000 election, because I'm not sure if you ever saw that movie Recount. I think it was on HBO or Netflix or something like that. But it talked about how close Florida was and how close of an election it was in 2000. And yet the crux of it all was that Bush won every single recount. But then in 2004, there was another interesting thing about, Fox News constantly touts voter fraud, and they're, talking about voter fraud over and over and over again, which I think they're just, they're ridiculous in their assertion that there's voter fraud from, certain communities. Where I'm looking at voter fraud is at the larger level, something on a level of government or something on a level of corruption, where you're dealing with, in 2004, Ohio, a number of Ohio exit polls had, and you're familiar with exit polls, right? So as soon as somebody leaves the booth, they walk out, people ask them, who'd you vote for? Mm-hmm. Now, they don't have to tell them the truth, but many counties had John Kerry winning, 80-20, 70-30, 60-40, and yet Bush was winning them 51-49 when you had this electronic voting. And Bush, of course, subsequently won Ohio, which did win the re-election. So the thing that I get most scared about is when you're dealing with people who are in power and they want more power, and so they will sway the election their way when they are in power. I mean, Nixon did this. I mean, there's a real powerful documentary on one of these shows as well that, just basically talked about how he pretty much wanted to just take over the election system and wanted it, to be in his favor. Absolutely. And he was above the law. And so, I mean, that's where, if we don't have the integrity of our democracy is based on the uninfringement of our elections. And when you're dealing with elections at a local level, on a state level, or on a national level, the integrity of those is really what is supporting our democracy. Otherwise, it's a house of cards that will fall. And so I think that there's some major problems when it comes to a higher level of government being in charge of something like that versus locally, because it's so much more difficult to corrupt if it's on a local level. People in Alabama are not going to be listening to what people in North Dakota, even if they are voting for the same candidate, on a national level. I mean, so when you're dealing with a local level as opposed to a national, there's so much less opportunity for fraud and corruption that I couldn't agree with you more that it needs to be stopped.
Yeah, exactly. I look at this as a huge power grab. This scares me because the entire idea here, this is basically an acknowledgement from our federal government that there could be some form of election tampering where it could result in a stolen election. So if we acknowledge that there could be some kind of tampering? Why would we centralize the system into just one system that could be destroyed or tampered with? Why would we not expand it out so where if one system is compromised, we're not going to be as affected. The results aren't going to be as skewed as if somebody in control. And again, I'm not necessarily even concerned about the foreign hackers accessing. I mean, it's a problem that could exist. Yeah, absolutely, and we should take that seriously. But I'm also, in addition to that, I'm concerned about, again, the same government that targeted the Tea Party during an election year, using the IRS as a weapon, which, again, could very well have swayed the results of that election. I'm concerned about them stealing the election and us essentially turning over into a banana republic where, these presidents are anointed rather than elected. This is my concern, and I refuse to support that. But let's talk about another power grab that's happening here. This is something that we have to get to because those of you out there, this is absolutely critical. This requires your action immediately. The Internet or the Protecting Internet Freedom Act. I have a clip here. I'm going to go ahead and play, folks. It talks about us giving over an American-made invention called the Internet to the rest of the world. Here's the clip.
The Internet. America invented it, and it has proven to be an amazing oasis of freedom. Free speech. Each of us able to speak our views online. And free enterprise. Millions of new businesses able to be opened online without any government pre-approval. But all of that could change. Right now, the Obama administration is trying to push through a radical proposal to give away control of the Internet to foreign countries. From the very first days of the Internet, the American government has maintained domain names and ensured equal access to everyone with no censorship whatsoever. Obama wants to give that power away to an international body called ICANN, which would empower countries like Russia and China and Iran. This Internet giveaway poses a great threat to our country's freedom and our national security. Russia and China and Iran don't have a First Amendment. They don't protect free speech, and they actively censor the Internet. ICANN could do the same thing, putting foreign countries in charge of what you can say online, prohibiting speech that they disagree with. Foreign governments are already planning to take ICANN and move it overseas so that it not only escapes U.S. law, but in effect turns into a mini United Nations. Unfortunately, Congress hasn't been willing to affirmatively act to prevent this giveaway before the transfer date on September 30th, 2016. That's why I've introduced the Protecting Internet Freedom Act to immediately stop this transfer and protect American sovereignty. Time is running out, and it's going to take the power of the American people and Congress to save the Internet. We must keep the Internet free. Free of taxes, free of regulation, and free of censorship. America built the Internet, and we shouldn't be giving it away to our enemies.
So you guys need to contact your representatives. If you don't want to hand over the Internet to the rest of the world, despots like China, Russia, Iran, if you want to make sure that the Internet stays free, write your representatives. Let them know to oppose any kind of power grab on the Internet and support the Protecting the Internet Freedom Act. Mark, what do you think about this? Does this concern you at all?
Yes. One of the things that I was really concerned with in Obama's first term was the kill switch on the Internet. And Obama had publicly exclaimed that the Internet is a human right and that no government should ever be able to have a kill switch on it. So that changed my opinion on what I thought he was about. The other thing that I have to say is that while Ted Cruz, and I think he was the one that was narrating that, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Well, Ted Cruz speaks of freedom, and I agree with him that we should not allow any other country's jurisdiction to maintain control over our own Internet process.
I feel like there's going to be a but. I knew it.
Yeah. So, well, because here's the thing, and this is where I'm a little baffled at your support of Ted Cruz, because this is a man who is, has basically said, and has said multiple times, that he believes in the law of Jesus Christ, and that we basically should be run under biblical rule and not necessarily just under the Constitution. And so when you're dealing with somebody that talks about freedom,
hold on, Mark. I got to call you out on that. Again, he has his personal beliefs, but he also says that states should be able to decide, for example, on the issue of gay marriage. He thinks marriage is an issue between a man and a woman, but and that the federal government actually doesn't even have a role to play in this. This should be left to the states to decide. So if, for example, New York thinks that homosexuals should be able to get married, then they should be able to get married in New York. And again, I think it was 35 or 36 states, maybe even more, that were allowed, that homosexuals were allowed to be married in. It was only a matter of time until they could go somewhere. But the point is, it really doesn't matter. My support of Ted Cruz really doesn't matter because he lost, and it's
that's
really
not what I'm
irrelevant.
talking. That's not so much what I'm talking about, though. I mean, the gay marriage thing was settled by the Supreme Court. I mean, my thing here is that. I mean, I very strongly disagree with the notion that Ted Cruz was not for a constitutional amendment banning gay marriage. When in 2004, I believe, Bush Jr., as president, was proposing a constitutional amendment defining marriages between a man and a woman. Now, I'm not sure if Cruz was in office at that time, but I'm almost certain the man would have approved of that kind us a bill.
I don't know. We can play this.
That being said,
I don't want to talk about Ted Cruz because I want us to focus back on the issue here because we can talk about our differences of opinion on Ted Cruz another day. We've only got 10 minutes left. So
when we're talking about freedom, though, is that he's saying freedom of speech, freedom of this, freedom of that? Absolutely. Banning censorship, totally agree. What about certain issues that are not necessarily, like, say, for instance, pot? Or what about, no, I mean, because in Oregon they had an issue, and I mean, I hate to even get into this because it makes me sound slimy, but when you're talking about, say, child pornography, and, what actually is pornography, what actually has a child in it, how old is the person, and so somebody, I think it was Peter Frampton, or somebody like that, like a famous musician who was looking online, and was basically piling up all of these different websites that had child or kiddie porn. And he was basically looking up these to see how easy this was to get. Or maybe that was just his excuse in the idea that, oh yeah, maybe I'm really looking forward to it, but, I'm just saying that I'm doing an investigative journalism. My point behind all of this is that where is it that we start to look at drawing the line when it comes to freedom of the internet, and where is it that the government gets to implement its jurisdiction? Because if you're talking about a bureaucracy out to that. You're talking about one inside of the United.
Oh, you're breaking up, Mark. You still there? Mark? Oh, looks like we might have lost Mark. Hey, Mark, you there?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. So you were saying before you broke up there. At what point should the government be stepping in to regulate the internet? Is that what you were saying?
Right. Exactly. So when it comes to commerce, when it comes to explicit acts, when it comes to when it comes to something like violence or obscenity or something to that effect, I'm almost certain, and the reason why I was saying Ted Cruz and I was pointing it out is that I'm almost certain he has some of his own opinions about how the government should be involved in censoring certain things that people can or cannot see on the internet.
Okay. Well, again, we could speculate. We'll speculate another day. I disagree with you about that. I think I've heard Ted Cruz on many different issues and interviews talking about how he has his own personal beliefs about his religious beliefs, but he also doesn't want to impose his will on other people and thinks that much of these issues should be left on a state level. Again, as far as keeping the internet free and keeping it American controlled, I think you and I would both agree that's probably the most free way to do it. Would you disagree with that?
No, I wouldn't disagree with that.
So on this issue, the Protecting the Internet Freedom Act, you would support Ted Cruz's efforts on this, correct?
I would support anybody's effort to basically say what that guy said, yes. Okay. I mean, the challenge that we had is that I think it was just last year or the year before when the FCC then made the internet a utility. And that, to me, was the beginning of the end, or that, to me, was the beginning of this type of that opened the door to massive regulation. And of the internet by the government.
Agreed, and I understand your suspicion of somebody who you think has different values than you, and I understand, but I don't think that we should be focusing on this episode on killing the messenger when you agree with the message. We can talk about that at another day, but we've only got like 7 minutes left in the program. So
no, that's fair.
Yeah.
You're right.
So as far as some of the other issues here, I want to talk about, and again, I've been arguing that the economy is very close to collapsing, and one of the things that is happening right now is that someone is artificially trying to keep the price of gold down. And I have an article here that I want to actually read to you guys about what is happening with gold futures. This was an article on ZeroHedge.com dated August 25th, 2016. And there was somebody here in this market that did a non-profit liquidation in 1 minute. They sold $1.5 billion of paper gold, essentially gold futures. And they made obviously in this kind of sell-off, they obviously were not trying to make money. It was a tactic to devalue the price of gold. So it was reported that someone puked $1.5 billion of notional gold. And the selling continues this is by Zero Hedge. They say gold continues to be pummeled, having broken through the 50-day moving average at $1,338. As we detailed earlier, it makes perfect sense. Someone decided, in keeping with their fiduciary duty at 0840 Eastern Standard Time, was a perfect time to unleash $1.5 billion of gold notional into the future markets. Over 10,000 contracts dumped in 1 minute. Normal. New low prices are bringing in some dip buyers, and silver dropped on heavy volume too. So I argue that they are trying to actually keep the price of gold low so that people can buy it now because it's low, and also so that the dollar continues to appear strong in comparison to the gold price. Again, they artificially devalue the price of gold and these precious metals while continuing to artificially prop up the U.S. dollar. And now they're talking about more quantitative easing. Janet Yellen has just released, I think it was a week or two ago, how she's potentially going to raise interest rates, which I argue will never happen. And Peter Schiff had something to say on this. I got a clip on that real fast, and then I want to get Mark's opinion on this for the last few minutes here. Here's a clip.
Peter Schiff, he is the CEO of Euro Pacific Capital. Thanks so much for joining us, Peter. You know, of course, the Fed kicks off that 2-day meeting today. What do you expect the Fed to do, and how do you expect the dollar to move as a result?
I don't expect the Fed to do anything. I think the only thing they do is talk. And the question is, are they going to still be talking as if they're planning on raising rates, or are they going to change their rhetoric to suggest that they're not even thinking about raising rates at this point? I don't think they are. I think they're thinking about cutting rates and doing more quantitative easing. The question is, are they ready to let the markets know that yet? And I don't think so.
So, Mark, I'm curious. What do you think is happening with this? Do you agree with me that somebody's artificially keeping these prices down, and that we have all these bubbles that are bound to pop, or do you think that everything's perfectly fine in the economy right now?
No, I don't think it's an either or like that. I don't think it's I mean, I think it's probably somewhere in between. When you're talking about market manipulation, that's a gross violation of anything SEC related, and so the Securities and Exchange Commission would get involved in something like that if it weren't if that actually were happening. You can't just you can't sell for the purpose of manipulating price. And so when you're dealing with something like that, if it was an illegal act, then that will be punished accordingly.
I guess we're just going to have to trust the federal government, the same federal government that wants to take over all of these other roles, and that it was involved in the IRS scandal.
Yeah, I mean, when we talked offline about how when you're looking at, say, FDR, who basically seized all of the gold of everybody in World War II in the United States. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. So, I mean, if it is the federal government and bureaucracy of doing something like that to artificially prop up gold, I don't know that it would have been done in such an open way. I mean, it seems like it would have been a lot more clandestine.
Have you heard about this on the news?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So I guess you're right. Well,
Yeah.
fair enough.
Okay.
Touche.
Anyway, we got to run, Mark. I really appreciate you coming on, man, and joining us again. You going to be on next week? You got time next week, man?
I sure do. It's always a pleasure, man.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks again for joining us, bud.
My pleasure.
All right.
Have
Take
a good
care.
day.
All right, folks, that's our show. I really appreciate you all tuning in week after week. MacPack, you're the tip of the spear, and again, you are the reason why we do the show. I hope that you contact your Congress people, your representative, let them know that you oppose any kind of centralization or globalization of the internet. Tell them to support the Protecting Internet Freedom Act. And again, don't forget to check us out on our website, OnTheMoveShow.com. Follow us on Spreaker.com/OnTheMoveShow. Like us on Facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow. Follow us on Twitter.com/OnTheMoveShow. Subscribe to us on YouTube.com/OnTheMoveShow. And don't forget to check out our shop link on our website. We got lots of originally designed products for sale on there, on hoodies, T-shirts, coffee mugs, phone cases. Your support of those, your purchases of those products help support this program, making us bigger and better, and we truly appreciate it. Thank you so much. And as always, know your rights, assert your rights, and get on the move.